Hey guys! How are you? Hope you are doing great, and yeah, I have a great story for you guys today. What if a person from our world reincarnate in Harry Potter universe or the wizarding world with a Magus chip? He will conquer the wizarding world and be the hero from the shadows. So let's start with any delay. Chapter 21, First Spell and the Forbidden Forest. Matthew entered a room full of obstacles, moving and still standing ones. As he walked into the center of the room, AI chip show me the details of the spell project. Project echolocation successfully completed. Creation of a spell model based on the animal physiology of bats, whales, dolphins, and additional details of sonar technology, successful. Through the usage of advanced arithmancy and runes, spell incantation and mystical energy model successfully simulated. Spell name, echolocation, incantation, Resnea locus, range, 12.31 m, mystical energy requirement, 0.0003 units per cast. After comprehending the details of his first successfully created spell, Matthew closed his eye. Resnea locus he cast, and suddenly an image of his surroundings appeared in his mind. He recovers in Hogwarts and surroundings approximately 0.0007 mystical energy units per second, outside it was only 0.0004. So he can maintain the spell for the whole time. As he gets more proficient in the spell, the energy requirements would become manageable. AI chip creates a new subroutine. Cast the echolocation spell every second and transcribe the data into my mental map. He ordered. Beep. Confirmed. New subroutine created. Well, now Matthew had a minimap, even though it almost halved his mystical energy regeneration. But it would help to at least monitor his immediate surroundings. After another few experiments, he made sure he mastered the spell enough. He now felt confident enough to explore the Forbidden Forest. At least he should be able to perceive danger and escape. The rest of the evening, he prepared some healing potions to take with him for his upcoming exploration of the forest. Scene break. On Thursday afternoon, Matthew sneaked out of the castle without being seen with the help of the disillusionment charm and approached the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest. The Forbidden Forest was thick with trees, such as beech, oak, pine, sycamore, and yew, as well as undergrowth such as knot grass and thorns, but there were paths, brooks, and some clearings. Matthew entered one of these paths. The further he wandered into the forest, the thicker it became. Off the path, the way was almost impassable. His first goal was to create a rough map of the forest. Time passed as he explored the outskirts of the forest, for now, he was doing the wild animals with his disillusionment charm. He even saw a horde of unicorns, but they ran away as they sensed his approach. The more time passed, the darker it became. It was hard to navigate the forest at night, as there were tree roots and stumps that were barely visible in near blackness. Only with the help of his echolocation spell, he was able to navigate the forest. The wand lighting charm would only lure predators to him and was of no use here. As midnight approached, he completed exploring the outskirts of the forest close to Hogwarts. In the outer parts, only the relative harmless magical creatures resided, at least harmless unless provoked, like unicorns, mooncalves, bowtruckles, hippogriffs, and thestrals. Inside the inner parts, far more dangerous creatures should be living. Who knows what else he would find? Things he gathered during today's explorations were some unicorn hairs, some simple potion ingredients, hippogriff feathers, and different plant probes he gathered. On his way back to the castle, his map showed some movement above him at his backside. As the creature came closer he could identify it. It was a soul acromantula. Pretending he didn't know it was there, he mentally prepared himself for a fight. He slowly pretended to continue walking to the castle while tracking the gigantic spider's movement. The moment he had the opportunity to take the shot, he turned around and cast Sectum Zempra. Sectum Zempra. The first dark cutting curse cut off two of the spider's hairy legs. The second one hit it directly in its head and cut deeply into it. It fell from the tree and landed with a loud thump on the forest dirt. The spider had 8 black eyes, who looked empty at the moment. It was covered in dark-haired furs and was about the size of a carthorse with 8 long legs. Below its eyes were a set of giant pedipalps, where some poison was dropping off to the ground. AI chip: is the acromantula still alive? Scan for life signs. Although my cutting curse should have killed it, they are very devious creatures, he requested as he eyed the giant spider's body. Beep. Scan complete, no life signs found. Confirmed death. He hurried and gathered the materials of the dead acromantula since others might be close by. Maybe it was just one hunting for some prey, but better be safe than sorry. He filled the venom and its blood into a crystal flask he prepared beforehand and cut off some flesh, bones, and its fangs, which are worth 100 galleons per fang. Then he scoped the eyes out of their sockets and put them in a container with preservation fluids. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to harvest the silk. They stored it in fluid form in their bodies. The moment it got exposed to air, it became an unusable mass. Maybe if he could store it in bottles without air exposure, he could use it. After putting the harvested materials into his trunk, he continued his journey out of the forest. Even with his sonar spell, it was getting hard to navigate the forest. For the next expedition, he needs to prepare some night owl potions, which would allow him to perceive the surroundings even with his eyes. After walking for over half an hour, he left the forest and sneaked back into the ancient castle, which was beautifully lit in the moonlight of the moon during this dark night. He entered the castle through the massive old entrance. While sneaking through these ancient halls, he had to take a few secret passages to dodge the caretaker Argus Filch and his annoying cat Mrs. Norris. As he arrived at the Ravenclaw Tower, he entered through the old entrance by solving the riddle, which he felt was harder than during the day, and sneaked into his dorm room. Without waking his roommates, he silently changed into his pyjama and entered his bed. Exhausted, he fell quickly into the land of dreams. Scene break. He was a bit sleepy during classes on Friday, but managed to pass through them without much trouble. He spent the rest of Friday brewing some night owl potions and experimenting with his newly gathered materials. For example, unicorn hair, while containing mystical energy, it was mixed with light-based particles. While the materials of the acromantula were full of dark magical particles. Both were the direct opposite of each other and would be in most potions harmful to each other without a binding agent. As for the blood samples, he made sure to preserve them inside his potion compartment with a stasis charm until he had more useful tools and knowledge to analyze their genetic composition and DNA. He could only confirm that the blood was also contaminated with dark energy particles. Thanks to the basic potioneer's stasis charm, he could preserve whatever he wanted. A really useful invention of wizard kind, which would be immensely useful in the future. After preparing the potions and finishing his experiments, he turned in for the night to catch enough sleep so he would be recovered for tomorrow. For another forest exploration, this time into the inner area. He was really interested what he would find inside the deeper parts. Chapter 22, Inner Forest. On Saturday morning he left a note for his roommates that he may be away till Sunday night, with the made-up excuse of a potion experiment. He took his trunk with his stuff and potions and stopped by the kitchens. He got sandwiches and enough water from the happy house elves. After his preparations were finished, he left for a part of the ancient castle where no portraits were present. After disillusioning himself, he sneaked out of the castle and returned to the outskirts of the old and massive forest. Matthew used a different path than last time. Thanks to his previous explorations, he that knew this one led into the inner parts of the forbidden forest. After wandering for a while through the thick forest, the vegetation became denser and wilder the more into the central parts he came. On his way, he, unfortunately, met 3 other acromantulas who tried to prey on him. Unfortunate for them, since they were alone every time, killing them off quickly. He really needed to thank Professor Snape somehow. Without his dark cutting curse he would have real trouble disposing of them without causing a commotion and luring other predators in. He had other spells which would be effective, but they were far louder, like the blasting curse. The dark cutting curse was his most deadliest and silent spell. After some time the pathway ended and was overgrown by the wilderness of the forest. With the help of the AI chip and the Point Me charm he was able to create a compass for his mental map and continued into the center of the ancient forest. He reached a wide clearing with some plants he never saw inside potion stores, only read of them. Deciding it was time for lunch, he rested on a tree stump where he ate some of his sandwiches. After lunch, he carefully harvested the plants and stored them inside the potion storage sections of his trunk. The clearing would make a good central point to explore the inner parts of the old forest. Matthew decided to create a basic shelter inside a thick tree. With cutting charms he carved a cave out wide enough for him to lay in. The entrance he hid behind leaves and bushes which he moved there. He cleaned the inside out with a few cleaning charms and transformed a nice and clean wooden floor with inanimate to inanimate transfiguration, out of the scraps formed by him cutting a cave into the tree. Since it was just changing the form of the material, not the material itself, the transfiguration would be permanent. It was getting slowly dark. After completing his rudimentary base inside the forest, he decided to explore the surroundings of the clearing with the night owl potions he prepared. He wanted to use most of his time inside the forest productively, since he could only enter this deep into the forest again, on the next weekend, at the earliest. So he explored the surroundings. He gathered some materials until he heard galloping steps, similar to horses, centaurs. He quickly silenced and disillusioned himself, and hid behind a tree while observing the direction where he heard the sounds from. After a few moments something appeared. It was a group of centaurs. Like horses, they had different kinds of colors. Most were a shade of brown or black, but one of them had even white fur. They had the body of a horse but the torso of a man with different facial features, hair, and eye colors. They had a quiver of arrows on their backs and a bow in their hands. One of them complained in an angry voice, "These acromantulas becoming more and more a menace inside the forest." Even though Hagrid told them to only stay in their part of the forest, they are traveling more and more out of the forest. Some of them dared to enter the dark ruins. Unbelievable. Calm down, Bane. They don't understand the ancient danger inside. I will talk with Hagrid again. He may be able to convince them to keep their distance from the Black Castle, reasoned an old-looking centaur in the front of the group as they left Matthew's hearing range. Matthew stayed hidden for a while until he was sure they left the area. AI chip marked the unexplored area in the direction they left as possible centaur camp. Also, mark the area they came from. There seems to be something interesting to explore tomorrow. A black castle, or at least its remains. I wonder what that is about, pondered Matthew. since he didn't remember anything from the Harry Potter books or movies about it. His hiding from the centaurs turned to be unexpectedly fruitful. After all, this was interesting information. Luckily they didn't spot him, or they would have definitely escorted him out of their forest. Especially since he only was a student or a foal for them. After exploring a bit into the direction the centaurs came from, he decided to return to his base since it was getting late, and the effects of his potions would end soon. He didn't want to use another one since he needed to rest, especially since he may explore ancient ruins tomorrow. He needed to be on top of his game. After returning to his clearing, while making sure nothing was following him, he passed through the bushes and entered the inside of his tree base. While enjoying a sandwich for dinner, he wondered what he would discover tomorrow. After dinner he took out a blanket and a pillow out of his magical trunk, to keep him warm during the cold night. After making sure the AI chip was on alert, he fell asleep to the sounds of the forest, the rustling of leaves, and the sounds of different animals. Nothing happened during the night and he could rest without trouble. The AI chip woke him up early on Sunday morning. After cleaning himself up, he enjoyed a quick breakfast and left his base after making sure it was well hidden since he wanted to use it in the future again. Matthew left in the direction the centaurs yesterday came from. He made sure to travel carefully and was disillusioned since he didn't want to be discovered by them. The deeper he traveled in that direction, the darker and colder it became. The atmosphere inside the forest became darker and darker even though it was day already and the sun stood high above the forest. Plants and trees took a darker shade than normal. Something about his destination was clearly suspicious. He would need to be very careful in his exploration. Traveling for over an hour in that direction, he arrived at a dark clearing. In the clearing were spread black stones on the forest floor. But there were only ancient-looking black stones, and an unpleasant atmosphere, very cold and dark. But what was so dangerous about a few black stones? No buildings, nothing. A castle stood definitely here a long time ago, but on first look, nothing remained. He explored the clearing but found nothing, and became a bit frustrated and disappointed. Until he decided to let the AI chip give it a try. AI chip, scan the area for anything, hopefully, you will be able to find anything. Beep. Scanning of the clearing is complete. Chapter 23, Black Castle Ruins. Beep. Scanning of the clearing is complete. Hidden enchantments found. Magical energy signature 6.38 meters to the north from host. On the left side of the pillar a small energy signature. Beside the pillar on the floor a larger one dot. So there was something hidden here, mused Matthew as he approached the position. While observing the pillar he found something on its left side hidden by dirt and dust. He cleaned it with his hands since he didn't want to risk damaging it with a cleaning charm. Below the dirt was an about palm-sized runic formation inscribed into the pillar. AI chip analyzes the rune formation. He ordered the chip. Analysis complete. The runic inscription doesn't fit into any known authorized runic system of the database. No clues were found in any known Hogwarts books. Runic language and ruins predate the founding of Hogwarts by several centuries. Runic cluster is connected to the energy signature on the floor dot. No known rune language. They also don't look like Norse since the AI chip could conclude how they should look based on data from the non-magical history books. Could it be? He suddenly had an idea what the purpose of the rune cluster is. Even though he could be wrong, it was a risky gamble. He raised his hand. Sometimes I have to take a risk. No idea where I could get more information about these runes in the near future, since I have read all books, he thought as he placed his hand on the cluster. Suddenly the floor before him lit up. It seems I was right. This was a door mechanism, he mused as he watched the ground opening up before him. A black staircase going deeper into the ground appeared. He could only see a few steps down before everything got devoured by blackness. Before he entered, he touched the formation again and the floor closed again. To confirm that it keeps working, he repeated the process a few times. So this doesn't seem to be a trap. But before that, I need to make sure I can leave. AI chip scan the other site for any rune cluster especially similar to the one on the pillar. Requested Matthew. Beep. Scan complete. Only one cluster was found approximately 3 m below on the right wall. Similar energy signature like the first cluster. Good, there was a mechanism on the other side. He thought as he took out his trunk, to get a flask of Night Owl potion. After gulping down the potion, he cast the low-level shield spell. The spell could be maintained the whole time and wouldn't consume his mystical energy reserves, although his regeneration would be severely impacted. But at least he had a higher survival chance. He stepped into the dark staircase while being on high alert. The feeling this place gave was dark and corrupted. After he walked a few meters down the stairs, the entrance closed behind him. He was completely submerged into darkness. Only with the help of the potion and his minimap was he able to navigate through the blackness of the room. Arriving at the bottom of the stairs, Matthew recognized a corridor with multiple rooms on the sides. 3 from every side. At the end of the corridor was a gigantic, ominous-looking black door. Before he stepped into the corridor, he checked for traps as he learned in Dada. To be sure, he let the AI chip scan the area. After he was as sure as he could be, he stepped into the dark corridor and approached the first door next to him. He carefully opened the door. Behind the door was a room with multiple cages inside. Everything was dead. Inside the cages were a few human skeletons. Yup, definitely the hideout of some ancient dark wizard. Maybe even a dark lord, thought Matthew as he eyed the skeletons. He decided to take some test samples. He collected a few bones and teeth. Maybe he was lucky and these were other wizards. At least he had a few human genetic samples for the future. If they were wizards, maybe they even had abilities like Parcel Tongue or Metamorph Magus. After storing them inside his trunk, he continued to the other rooms. He found another room with cages, but nothing inside. As he was about to leave, he saw something on the cages. Runic inscription again, but incomplete and corroded over time. But if he checked every cage, he may be able to complete the runic cluster of the cage. AI chip scan the cages and store the runic clusters in the database. Task complete, ringed the voice of the chip after a while inside his head. After scanning every cage, he returned to the other cage room and repeated the process. The runes were also present on the cages there. Having scanned every cage, he left the room and entered the next one. Inside he found the remains of a potion lab. Besides a few tables, broken vials, and some rusted cauldrons. Most of it turned to dust. The only interesting thing inside was an incomplete runic cluster below a cauldron on the floor. He also made sure to scan that one, although it was incomplete. The more data he collected on the unknown runic system, the more he would be able to understand of it. The next room was a bedroom. It was the only room with a light runic cluster. He also scanned and saved that cluster inside his database. Besides a few small gold plates, nothing noteworthy was inside the room. Time turned most of it into dust. The last 2 rooms were storage rooms with potion ingredients. Most of them, even with stasis charms applied, already turned bad after the stasis stopped working. But the rarest ones were stored inside a stasis rune cluster. There were some rare ingredients he only recognized from books, he never saw them in real life. Like Hydra scales, shadow demon dust, lamia hair, and a few unknown more, like a bag of dust that gave of a cold, unsettling feeling. He directly stored them inside his trunk and added a few stasis charms himself to protect them. He wasn't sure if he would ever find more of these ingredients. For now, they were too valuable to waste. He would need to carefully study them. After clearing out the last rooms, and recording every rune cluster he found, he approached the black door. Another set of large rune clusters was inscribed into the door, their purpose is unknown. Only the cluster in the center of the double door looked similar to the ones outside. After recording the runes, he lightly touched the central rune cluster. Some kind of barrier fell and the door opened. What he saw and felt on the other side made him directly close the door again and reactivate the runes. Here. They shouldn't be here. How are they here? They are supposed to be only in Azkaban. According to the books I read, they were supposed to be created there, wondered Matthew as many thoughts raced through his mind. At the moment he had no way to explore further, because he had no spell to handle them. Behind the door were a pack of Dementus, which shouldn't even be here. The only charm known to wizards which can handle them was the Patronus charm, which he didn't practice yet since he didn't expect to meet any of them in the next 3 years. No choice, he left the ruins and sealed everything up before he wandered in the direction of Hogwarts. Chapter 24, Ratchidian. Matthew reached Hogwarts around dinner time. He quickly sneaked back into the Ravenclaw Tower and took a quick shower before he rushed to dinner. He joined his friends at the Ravenclaw table. "So where did you disappear for the weekend?" asked Roger. "Well, I had to complete some potions experiments with some rare ingredients that I've got recently," lied Matthew. "But you weren't in the potions labs for students," continued Blake, while watching him. "There are many secret places in the castle. Since I didn't want to be disrupted, I used a hidden place." "What did you guys do this weekend?" He changed the topic. "Well," answered Harold, the friends continued to chat about different things, since they wouldn't gain more answers from Matthew. They knew he would often disappear in the castle but never overnight before. So they continued to eat their dinner until Cho joined them. "You missed our study group," she said while staring at Matthew. "Oh shit, I am sorry, Cho. I completely forgot that. I've had to take care of something else and forgot to tell you. I will make it up to you. Let me teach you some useful spells on Friday, okay?" asked Matthew with a smile. "Okay, no problem. But please tell me next time you would have to miss our session," replied Cho with a cute pout. They finished their dinner and returned together back to the common room. Tilda scene break. Tilda. After a revitalizing full night of sleep, he spent his Monday morning inside classes. First thing after classes he left for the room of requirements. He walked 3 times before the room entrance. "I need books and information about black castles, ancient dark wizards, and Dementus. I need books and information about black castles, ancient dark wizards, and Dementus. I need books and information about black castles, ancient dark wizards, and Dementus." Inside the room he found 3 bookshelves. In the left one were lots of history books about dark wizards. The right one contained books about Dementus, some charm books, and some defense books, but not as many as in the bookshelves about dark wizards. And last but not least, the middle bookshelf contained only 2 books. First was a book by the name of The History of the Patronus Charm, and the second was The Tale of Rachidian. Matthew started to read the books of the middle shelf first, since they were most likely the information he needed the most. After reading the book, he understood who lived inside the ruins of the Black Castle in the past. In summary, according to legend, Rachidian was a dark wizard who lived with a colony of Dementus in a black castle in a dense forest, which surrounded a nearby mountain village inhabited by fellow witches and wizards. The village stood most likely where Hogsmeade now is, but was probably abandoned in the past until Hogsmeade was founded in the 10th or 11th on the ruins of that village. For many years, Rachidian and the unearthly denizens of the castle coexisted peacefully with the villagers, leaving them alone, while they in kind kept out of the part of the woods where his castle was located. Well, until he fell in love with a girl from the village. He wanted to take her as his wife but got rejected, so like expected of a dark wizard, he decided to attack the village to kidnap her. The villagers fought back, with the combined might of their patronesses. But the sheer numbers of Dementus began to slowly overwhelm them. As all hope was lost and the villagers began to flee, an orphan who was told his patroness was no good because it only had the form of a small mouse, summoned his patroness and was able to repel the Dementus by himself. Well, Rachidian got envious and enraged, since the girl liked the boy and his patroness repelled his army of Dementus. In his anger, he cast the patronus charm himself to repel the mouse patroness, but he forgot that only people pure of heart could cast the charm. Instead of a patronus, maggots shot out of his wand and quickly devoured him as they engulfed his body. All in all, I've learned a few things about the patronus charms. Firstly, size doesn't matter. Second, evil wizards are unable to cast the charm or it will attack themselves, but only evil wizards, not practitioners of the dark arts in general. Dumbledore practiced the dark arts in the past and has no problems with casting it. The most prominent example would be Professor Snape himself. He has a deeper understanding of the dark arts than Dumbledore and used them frequently but was still able to cast the patronus charm. He is also rather of a neutral alignment than good. So Matthew should be also able to cast the charm, even though he wouldn't consider himself pure of heart. Especially he wasn't evil. But he wasn't still sure how Dementus appeared there. In the books, it was mentioned that Dementus were created on the island of Azkaban a few centuries later by another dark wizard who goes by the name of Ecrisdis. Maybe both of them found the method to create Dementus separate from each other. Matthew was pretty sure that he was the first person to enter the hidden underground of Rachidian's Black Castle. Maybe he would find the answer there. But first, he needed to learn the patronus charm, or else he wouldn't be able to ward off the Dementus in the ruins. Hopefully, there is something else inside than just Dementus. He theoretically knew how to successfully cast the charm, but he believes it would be harder than normal. Matthew spent the rest of the day practicing the patronus charm. Even though he tried to concentrate on happy memories, he was completely unsuccessful. It was getting late and he decided to leave for the common room for the day. After spending some time with his friends, he decided to go to sleep. The next days were spent similarly. He practiced the charm but at most he managed to conjure white mist. Behind the black doors, he saw hundreds of Dementus sealed inside. There was no way that an incorporeal patronus would be enough. He needed to take many breaks between practices since the charm consumed a massive amount of mystical energy and drained his reserves very fast. One advantage was that his reserves expanded faster. During his breaks, he used the time to read about the patronus charm and Dementus. They were humanoid-shaped creatures, with an approximate height of 3 meters, and were covered in dark hooded cloaks of long ripped black cloth, making them closely resemble wraiths. Their bodies were grayed and decayed looking, like a decomposing corpse, and their breath sounded rattling like they were trying to suck more than air out of a room. Their hands were glistening, grayish, slimy looking, and scabbed. They seemed to exude cold. A Dementor's face had empty eye sockets, covered with scabbed skin. There was a gaping large hole where the mouth should have been, which was used to suck the soul out of the victim in a process called the Dementor's kiss, leaving victims in a state generally considered worse than death. The Dementor pulled back its hood and sucked out its victim's soul, leaving the person an empty shell, alive but completely, irretrievably gone. Even worse than what he did to the gang members, they could at least develop a new self. They were described as being able to glide over the ground only, and in any case, they couldn't pass through solid obstacles, so as long as he closed the door behind him they were unable to leave the ruins. Dementors seemed to suck all the light and happiness from the air as they drew long rattling breaths and caused darkness to close in everywhere and the victim to feel incredibly cold. They could glide towards a victim without sound. They were attracted to victims with powerful souls or a lot of pain. Since they fed on emotions and souls. And worst of all, they were immortal. Or at least nobody knew a method to kill them. Since he now possessed ruins full of experimental subjects, why not experiment with them? It was an interesting question what Fanfictions or the killing curse would do to them. But no matter what, first, he needed to cast the Patronus charm. And in no book, he found an answer to his problem. He just didn't have a really happy memory, his death dimmed all his happy memories somehow down. None of them were really powerful. Until he read a sentence in one of the books again, that made him want to slap himself. Chapter 24, Ratchidian. Matthew reached Hogwarts around dinner time. He quickly sneaked back into the Ravenclaw Tower and took a quick shower before he rushed to dinner. He joined his friends at the Ravenclaw table. "So where did you disappear for the weekend?" asked Roger. "Well, I had to complete some potions experiments with some rare ingredients that I've got recently," lied Matthew. "But you weren't in the potions labs for students," continued Blake, while watching him. "There are many secret places in the castle. Since I didn't want to be disrupted, I used a hidden place." "What did you guys do this weekend?" He changed the topic. "Well," answered Harold, the friends continued to chat about different things, since they wouldn't gain more answers from Matthew. They knew he would often disappear in the castle but never overnight before. So they continued to eat their dinner until Cho joined them. "You missed our study group," she said while staring at Matthew. "Oh shit, I am sorry, Cho. I completely forgot that. I've had to take care of something else and forgot to tell you. I will make it up to you. Let me teach you some useful spells on Friday, okay?" asked Matthew with a smile. "Okay, no problem. But please tell me next time you would have to miss our session," replied Cho with a cute pout. They finished their dinner and returned together back to the common room. Tilda scene break. Tilda. After a revitalizing full night of sleep, he spent his Monday morning inside classes. First thing after classes he left for the room of requirements. He walked 3 times before the room entrance. "I need books and information about black castles, ancient dark wizards, and dementors. I need books and information about black castles, ancient dark wizards, and dementors. I need books and information about black castles, ancient dark wizards, and dementors." Inside the room he found 3 bookshelves. In the left one were lots of history books about dark wizards. The right one contained books about dementors, some charm books, and some defense books, but not as many as in the bookshelves about dark wizards. And last but not least, the middle bookshelf contained only 2 books. First was a book by the name of The History of the Patronus Charm, and the second was The Tale of Rachidian. Matthew started to read the books of the middle shelf first, since they were most likely the information he needed the most. After reading the book, he understood who lived inside the ruins of the Black Castle in the past. In summary, according to legend, Rachidian was a dark wizard who lived with a colony of Dementors in a black castle in a dense forest, which surrounded a nearby mountain village inhabited by fellow witches and wizards. The village stood most likely where Hogsmeade now is, but was probably abandoned in the past until Hogsmeade was founded in the 10th or 11th on the ruins of that village. For many years, Rachidian and the unearthly denizens of the castle coexisted peacefully with the villagers, leaving them alone, while they in kind kept out of the part of the woods where his castle was located. Well, until he fell in love with a girl from the village. He wanted to take her as his wife but got rejected, so like expected of a dark wizard, he decided to attack the village to kidnap her. The villagers fought back, with the combined might of their patronesses. But the sheer numbers of Dementors began to slowly overwhelm them. As all hope was lost and the villagers began to flee, an orphan who was told his patroness was no good because it only had the form of a small mouse, summoned his patroness and was able to repel the Dementors by himself. Well, Rachidian got envious and enraged, since the girl liked the boy and his patroness repelled his army of Dementors. In his anger, he cast the patroness charm himself to repel the mouse patroness, but he forgot that only people pure of heart could cast the charm. Instead of a patroness, maggots shot out of his wand and quickly devoured him as they engulfed his body. All in all, I've learned a few things about the patroness charms. Firstly, size doesn't matter. Second, evil wizards are unable to cast the charm or it will attack themselves, but only evil wizards, not practitioners of the dark arts in general. Dumbledore practiced the dark arts in the past and has no problems with casting it. The most prominent example would be Professor Snape himself. He has a deeper understanding of the dark arts than Dumbledore and used them frequently but was still able to cast the patroness charm. He is also rather of a neutral alignment than good. So Matthew should be also able to cast the charm, even though he wouldn't consider himself pure of heart, especially he wasn't evil. But he wasn't still sure how Dementors appeared there. In the books, it was mentioned that Dementors were created on the island of Azkaban a few centuries later by another dark wizard who goes by the name of Ecrisdis. Maybe both of them found the method to create Dementors separate from each other. Matthew was pretty sure that he was the first person to enter the hidden underground of Rachidian's Black Castle. Maybe he would find the answer there. But first, he needed to learn the patroness charm, or else he wouldn't be able to ward off the Dementors in the ruins. Hopefully, there is something else inside than just Dementors. He theoretically knew how to successfully cast the charm, but he believes it would be harder than normal. Matthew spent the rest of the day practicing the patroness charm. Even though he tried to concentrate on happy memories, he was completely unsuccessful. It was getting late and he decided to leave for the common room for the day. After spending some time with his friends, he decided to go to sleep. The next days were spent similarly. He practiced the charm but at most he managed to conjure white mist. Behind the black doors, he saw hundreds of Dementors sealed inside. There was no way that an incorporeal patroness would be enough. He needed to take many breaks between practices since the charm consumed a massive amount of mystical energy and drained his reserves very fast. One advantage was that his reserves expanded faster. During his breaks, he used the time to read about the patroness charm and Dementors. They were humanoid-shaped creatures, with an approximate height of 3 meters, and were covered in dark hooded cloaks of long ripped black cloth, making them closely resemble wraiths. Their bodies were greyed and decayed looking, like a decomposing corpse, and their breath sounded rattling like they were trying to suck more than air out of a room. Their hands were glistening, greyish, slimy looking, and scabbed. They seemed to exude cold. A Dementor's face had empty eye sockets, covered with scabbed skin. There was a gaping large hole where the mouth should have been, which was used to suck the soul out of the victim in a process called the Dementor's kiss, leaving victims in a state generally considered worse than death. The Dementor pulled back its hood and sucked out its victim's soul, leaving the person an empty shell, alive but completely, irretrievably gone. Even worse than what he did to the gang members, they could at least develop a new self. They were described as being able to glide over the ground only, and in any case, they couldn't pass through solid obstacles, so as long as he closed the door behind him they were unable to leave the ruins. Dementors seemed to suck all the light and happiness from the air as they drew long rattling breaths and caused darkness to close in everywhere and the victim to feel incredibly cold. They could glide towards a victim without sound. They were attracted to victims with powerful souls or a lot of pain. Since they fed on emotions and souls. And worst of all, they were immortal. Or at least nobody knew a method to kill them. Since he now possessed ruins full of experimental subjects, why not experiment with them? It was an interesting question what Fanfictions or the killing curse would do to them. But no matter what, first, he needed to cast the Patronus charm. And in no book, he found an answer to his problem. He just didn't have a really happy memory, his death dimmed all his happy memories somehow down. None of them were really powerful. Until he read a sentence in one of the books again, that made him want to slap himself. Chapter 26, The Scroll. Matthew turned to the scroll on the pedestal. He only learned a bit of it, but it had a fearsome history. But it was exactly what he was looking for. This scroll was only one of many others. All of them together were a collection of knowledge called the Book of Sin. Each scroll was indestructible and had changed throughout history. First, they were written on flesh, then on stones, and now on parchment. They proved that magic is older than any Harry Potter theory believed. The law seekers of the Harry Potter universe believed that the first magic users existed 5000 BC in ancient Egypt. But this scroll were according to Rachidian notes mentioned already thousands of years before that. Rachidian couldn't find their exact origin or even a legend of it, but supposedly the scrolls contained a vast amount of magical knowledge, mainly of dark nature, called black magic in general. They grant the owners a vast amount of power. It was theorized that a being like a devil or something similar created it to keep his influence on Earth. Multiple dark magic books are based on parts of the knowledge of these scrolls. Studying the scrolls is dangerous since they are supposedly corrupting the reader and driving him into madness so he would follow the will of the original creator. Maybe they are Horcruxes or something similar. I will need to be very careful with them. They seem to be more powerful than anything Voldemort could even dream of. Maybe it's time to find a way to read something through the AI chip. Since the AI chip is only semi-sentient and has no personality, it shouldn't be corrupted. Mused Matthew while staring at the scroll. This particular scroll contains knowledge about the runic language that was used in the whole ruins. It is a very powerful language since it still worked after so many years. The name of the runic language was the Dark Tongue. It was spoken and used in a different dimension full of dark beings. The scroll also contained knowledge about summoning lower beings from other dimensions and controlling them. One of them was the Dementors. The Dementors weren't originally from the Earth. they were summoned from another unknown dimension and controlled by Rachidian with the help of the scroll's knowledge. The Dementus in Azkaban probably came in a similar way to Earth. Maybe there was another scroll in Azkaban which was owned by Ekrisdis. Azkaban was definitely a place worth visiting in the future, well exploring. The scroll may be still there. But first of all, he needed to find a way to read them or resist their corruption. According to Rachidian notes, he originally was just a researcher studying the scroll for the Sake of knowledge and got corrupted through them. He then fell into darkness and became known as a dark wizard until his death. His decent occlumency shields didn't protect him. Matthew hoped his AI chip would be able to help him without corrupting him. He took out his trunk and opened the still empty bottom section of his 7 sections and levitated the scroll into it before his curiosity takes over and he tries to read it. Afterward, he stored the rest of the library inside the library section of his trunk. Before he put his trunk away, he checked the library for any hidden storage or sections, but unfortunately, he found nothing. He packed his trunk away and decided it was time to return to the castle. Before activating the rune cluster on the black door, he summoned his 3-legged crow Patronus again. After opening the door, the dark and cold aura of the Dementus spread out again, but was quickly suppressed by his white-silver glowing Patronus. The Dementus once again fled to the far ends of the large hall, to create as much distance from him. Before leaving, Matthew spent his time recording the runes on the walls and floors, which kept the Dementus aura inside the room. He made sure the library door was closed again, before entering through the other black door into the black corridor. As he closed that door again, he cancelled his Patronus charm and climbed the stairs upwards, and left the Black Castle ruins into the Forbidden Forest again. After making sure the ruins were sealed again so nobody could find them since they could serve as a secret hideout in the future. They were outside the Hogwarts wards, so Dumbledore wouldn't be able to sense him here. The sky outside began to become darker, but he should be able to reach the Hogwarts castle before dinner ends. Once again he concealed himself with the help of the disillusionment charm as he moved through the dark forest. He passed through the Forbidden Forest without trouble. The vegetation became less dense as it became too dark to see with his eyes. Thanks to his minimap, he could still navigate through the darkness. He didn't need to waste another night owl potion before finally reaching the outskirts of the forest. It was still dinner time as he reached the giant castle gate. He quickly rushed to the Ravenclaw Tower and entered the common room to take a quick shower. After cleaning himself up, he left for dinner. Unfortunately, his friends were already finished and left before he arrived. He enjoyed a nice dinner alone, before leaving for his common room where he found his friends completing their homework. He got his school thing from his bedroom and joined them for the rest of the night. Scene break. On Sunday he started studying the books from the library in the ruins. Most of the knowledge wasn't inside his database. With the help of his quick reading glasses, he was able to complete around 15% of his new books. He also started a new spell creation process for his AI chip. This time he wanted to create a spell model for an analysis and reading spell. It's a spell that should be able to comprehend the atomic structure of targeted objects, their energy signatures, and every detail including written knowledge. Including the scientific principles of Earth's current technology to analyze materials and objects like atomic absorption spectroscopy, atomic force microscopy, tomography, or different other spectroscopies added to magical knowledge like scanning and analysis charms. It should be absolutely possible. At least a simple version to read books. Spell model creation process started. Estimated time until completion 31 days 4 hours and 32 minutes. Well, it is possible, but it takes a shit ton of time. Until the spell is finished he wouldn't be able to read the scroll. Complex spells take a shit ton of time to create. The only method he knew at the moment to improve his AI chip's calculation speed is occlumency. But he wanted first to learn all the knowledge he could get about mind magic and the human brain, to improve the occlumency he would practice in the future. According to his knowledge of occlumency, he would need to build up defenses which he would need to create from new if he wanted to use another method. Before that he needed to complete the trials of Ravenclaw. So for the next month, he would, besides his study sessions with Joe and some with his roommates, either be in the room of requirements or library studying books about the different attack and defense spells. He also spent time thinking which spells he should create. The task was to at least create one attack and one defense spell. But it would be better to create more before attempting the trial. He also sent a letter to his parents that he would like to spend the winter holidays with them this year and they should visit another magical community somewhere in Europe combined with a nice holiday. Chapter 27, Spells and Names. Beep. Spell creation process finished. New spell model created. Name, scan, incantation, inadu, range, touch, magical energy cost, variable, based on object size, composition, etc. Description, a spell to analyze an object that the caster is touching. It scans the atomic structure of the object and turns and uploads it into the mind. An advanced caster can read whole books or scrolls this way. No spells or traps on the object will be activated, although the pieces of information itself could still affect the caster. The AI chip can add the information directly into the database. So that's that, thought Matthew while sitting in the middle of a boring history lesson about a goblin rebellion in 1612 in Hogsmeade, where the goblins took the Three Broomsticks as their headquarters. His classmates were happily asleep while a few studious Ravenclaws like Blake tried to follow the lesson. AI chip begin improving the stunning spell based on the specifications in the file stupefy.mk.2. Beginning task. Base spell already existing. Starting spell modification. Estimated time of completion, 2 hours 12 minutes. Perfect, thought Matthew while continuing to nap for the rest of the lesson. After the lesson, he left his friends since it was the last lesson of the day and walked into the room of requirements. He summoned a room with darker books about battle spells, since he wanted to use their content for his spells. They were only considered dark because of their lethal nature, but in the end, it was a matter of the caster's intent. He could also kill with a levitation charm or a stunning spell. Time to try my new spell, he muttered as he took a copy of Book of Curses by Azuf and cast. Inadu, a stream of information appeared in his mind, including a 3D model of the atomic structure of the book. How someone else is supposed to read a book with that is a mystery to me. Well, AI, do your thing. Beep. Data compiled. Book of Curses by Azuf added to the database. Perfect, exclaimed Matthew, and took the next book into his hand as he continued to add all of the books into his database. After saying AI chip again, Matthew came to a decision. Hey, AI chip, let me give you a name. Beep. Please enter a new name. Matthew thought for a while. Many names came to his mind, but he wanted to give it a deeper meaning. He thought about Iron Man's J.R.V.I.S, F.R.I.D.Y, or even E.D.I.T.H with the nice meaning of even dead I am the hero from the MCU, and decided to take the same approach. Your name will be S.RAH, it stands for Self-Aware Research Assistance Helix. Beep. The new name is confirmed. Hello, my name is Sarah. Nice to meet you, Sarah. Let's continue with our work, said a smiling Matthew. After another half an hour of scanning books, he heard the familiar sound of Sarah again. Beep. The spell creation process is finished. Spell model successfully modified. Name, Personal Stunning Charm, Incantation, Stupefy, Range, Mid, Magical Energy Cost, 1.3 units, Description, similar to the base spell, it stuns an enemy. But it is more powerful. Although it still can be blocked by shield charms like Protego, it wears down the shield faster. Unlike the original spell, only the caster can revive the target with the reviving spell Renovate. The spell color changed from red to dark blue. Good work, Sarah. I will test out the new spell. You can continue creating the spell specified in file hexagon shield mk.1. Replied Matthew after the new spell appeared in his mind. Beginning task. Loading specifications. Loading shield spell knowledge and physics data. Starting spell creation process. Estimated time of completion, 4 hours 6 minutes. While Sarah started her new task, a dummy appeared on one side of the room of requirements. Matthew aimed with his finger at the dummy and cast Stupefy. A purple spell shot out and slowly fell to the floor. It's not so easy to switch between similar spells with the same incantations, even the intent of the spell is mostly similar. After a few tries, while concentrating more on the specific flow of his magical energy and intent, a blue glowing projectile shot out of his finger and impacted the training dummy. Yes. Success. Cheered Matthew. He tried the spell another few times before he continued adding books into his database. Over 3 hours later he heard Sarah again. Beep. The spell creation process is finished. Spell model successfully modified. Name, Hexagon Shield Charm, Incantation, Hectego, Range, very short, Magical Energy Cost, 4.1 units, Description, a strong shield charm similar to the Protego charm but higher in defense. It's a shield dome formed out of many small hexagon shields. Thanks to its efficient structure, it holds around 4 times the damage of a conventional Protego charm for only 1.5 times the magical energy consumption. The shield covers the caster like the Protego shield on all sides. It also can't block the unforgivables. The only weakness is minuscule during fights. If the same hexagon shield is hit multiple times in quick succession, the whole shield structure would become unstable and collapse. But after being hit, a hexagon shield regenerates in less than half a second. An opponent would need to be prepared to succeed in breaking the hexagon shield charm in that way. While comprehending the new pieces of information that appeared in his mind, Matthew decided to let Sarah start with the creation of the 3 other attack and defense spells he thought of for the trials of Ravenclaw. Their creation process would take until tomorrow afternoon. After letting Sarah begin her new task, Matthew started to practice the hexagon shield charm. After a few tries he finally succeeded in creating a stable shield. The previous tries always ended up with an incomplete structure, which made the shield fall and collapse by itself. The stable shield appeared as a yellow glowing force field made up of many small hexagon shields around him. Matthew closed his eyes and a few moments later an attack training dummy appeared. It looked like a regular training dummy but had a wand in its right hand. The attack dummy can shoot simple spells like stinging hexes and knockback jinxes. Matthew wanted to test out the durability of the shield. He placed himself before the attack dummy, and it began to shoot knockback jinxes at his hexagon shield. The new shield spell was able to tank around 400 knockback jinxes. Next, he tried a regular Protego shield charm. It was only able to tank a bit less than 100 knockback jinxes. The estimations of Sarah were correct. The hexagon shield charm was around 4 times stronger than the regular Protego charm. He should be able to improve it further in the future with more information. But for now, it was a perfect defensive spell for his level, although somewhat inflexible, a problem which the next defensive spell Sarah was working on would solve. Matthew continued summoning his new shield spell until he could finally summon it instantly at every try. With a wand, it became even stronger than wandless. After practicing for a few hours, it became rather dark outside. He decided to return to the common room. Since it was already past curfew, he used the disillusionment charm so he could dodge any possible punishment. Good that he used it, since he met Filch and his annoying cat on the way. After passing both of them without trouble, he arrived at his common room, where he turned in for the night since it was already mostly empty. Chapter 28, Life. The next morning, after his morning workout at breakfast, Morgana brought Matthew a reply from his parents. They decided to visit the Netherlands during the Christmas holidays. They already booked a hotel in Amsterdam. This was an interesting location. The Muggle countries there are different from their magical counterpart. The magical community in the Netherlands was a part of the magical country of Flanders. The magical country of Flanders was geographical a region located in parts of present-day France, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Unlike the non-magical part of the former duchy, it didn't become a part of French suzerainty and stayed independent till today. Although its capital was still Bruges, the largest shopping district there was located in Amsterdam. Flanders has its own Quidditch team. The team played against Transylvania in 1473 at the first Quidditch World Cup, reaching the final. The children could either attend Boesbaten's Academy of Magic in France or Durmstrang Institute Northern Europe. They receive invitations for both schools and can choose one of them. Although most of them join Boesbaten's since they already speak French, since it's their second national language after Dutch. Well, Matthew was happy to explore a new magical community which was only mentioned on a side note in canon. The non-magical site of Amsterdam was also an amazing place to explore. With a lot of amazing sightseeing locations, like over 500 coffee shop locations, with almost no rules since the laws only became stricter in 1995 and tourists were only prevented to buy weed there from 2007 onwards with the introduction of the weed sweepers. After all, Matthew had a large trunk in possession and stasis charms. The prices also were cheap without the over 30 years of inflations and crisis till he died in his world. Why not invest £3,600 after beating up some criminal scum into a currency only he could invest in that form? A gram of weed cost currently £2 to £4, while after the introduction of the euro it would be around £9 to £16. Which would be a nice investment for money he had no use for at the moment, and he still wanted to study in the future. Students liked weed and were ready to pay a bit. Since he was underage, he couldn't invest it into shares and he couldn't exactly tell his parents he had exact information of the future or divined the development of the economy. It was too absurd. He could still invest his money in the future since the first iPhone came only in 2007 out and Facebook was founded in 2004. Maybe he could use their ideas before them, which would make him one of the richest people in the world. Before even cryptocurrency came out, he could be filthy rich, legally. Damn, knowing the future is op. Well, lucky me, thought Matthew while finishing his breakfast. After that he left for classes for the day. Scene break. Beep. Task completed. Spell creation processes finished. New spell models created for files: Mini Hexa Shield Mk.1, Piercing Mk.1 and Almighty Push Mk.1. Name: Mini Hexa Shield. Charm, Incantation, Hectum, Range, Mid, Magical Energy Cost, 0.3. Description: a small shield made of 4 small hexagon shields. As the large version, through its structural integrity, it is much more durable than similar shield charms. Differently from the large hexagon shield charm, the caster can summon this shield quickly in a mid-distance where he wants. Although it's not as powerful, it is more versatile and flexible. Name: Dark Piercing Curse, Incantation, Therese Emperor, Range, Long, Magical Energy Cost, 1.2. Description: a dark piercing curse, similar to Severus Snape's dark cutting curse Sectum's Emperor. It has a strong piercing power that focuses on one point. It can penetrate most shields and many magic-resistant hides. It's a very lethal spell, many hits end deadly thanks to the dark nature of the spell, which makes wounds very hard to heal. Name: Almighty Push Spell, Incantation, Omniventis, Range, Short Mid, Magical Energy Cost, 2.2. Description: a strong area of effect spell. It affects the area around the caster by employing a gravity force away from the caster. Everything surrounding the caster will be pushed away, although its effect on other spells is greatly reduced. It can act as an offensive or defensive spell by repelling incoming projectiles. He heard Sophie exulting at the end of his lessons today. After packing up, he entered the room of requirements again. This time there was only a training area split into 2 parts. The first half was full of stationary training dummies randomly distributed on the field at different distances. In the second area stood an attack dummy again. Matthew started practicing the Mini Hexa Shield charm, Hectum. He cast repeatedly until a small shield appeared before him. After a few successful tries, he tried to cast them in different distances and locations before he approached the attack dummy. As the dummy began attacking in a random pattern, Matthew practiced blocking the different stinging projectiles. The shields lasted only 4 moments, but it should be able to block anything, short of the 3 unforgivables. After he was confident that he mastered the spell, he continued with the Dark Piercing Curse. It was a dark violet-colored spike made of energy, which pierced with ease through multiple dummies until colliding with a barrier on the wall of the room. Conveniently, the room created a barrier around the room to block such spells. He practiced the curse until he was confident with his aim and casting. Last but not least, he tried the Almighty Push spell. After standing in the middle of the training field with a lot of dummies around him, he started to cast the spell, Omniventis, a few times before finally everything around him got slightly pushed away. Although his first successful try was still pretty weak. But the more he practiced, the stronger the spell became. As he mastered the spell, the training dummies directly surrounding him crashed into the barrier at a high velocity, while the others a bit further away got pushed away a few meters. Between practice sessions, he rested while regenerating his magical energy. During his breaks he read a few books that he summoned inside the room. After resting at the end of the day, he made himself leisurely on the way in the direction of the Ravenclaw Tower. As he arrived, he joined his friends in the common room and played a bit with them. Slowly the common room became emptier and emptier. After his friends also left for their dorm room, he started reading one of the books in the common room chosen by Professor Flitwick. A few moments after the last students left the common room, the blue glowing Ravenclaw symbol appeared again on the wall. He waited another few minutes to make sure nobody was returning before approaching the wall. As he stood again before the blue glowing symbol, the symbol expanded outwards again and began rotating. The portal formed, and Matthew stepped through it into the already familiar room with the bronze eagle. As the blue portal closed behind him. "Welcome back, heir of Ravenclaw. Are you ready to complete your trials? Take a moment to think about it. Every heir only has one try to succeed. Failure means the chance on the inheritance is forever forfeited. It's still only the middle of the year, you have enough time to improve yourself and your self-created spells," began the bronze eagle in his arrogant voice. "No, I am ready to get the inheritance. I am prepared enough," replied Matthew with absolute confidence while staring at the eagle. "So be it. Let's begin," said the eagle while another portal appeared before Matthew. Chapter 29, Dark Souls. Suddenly Matthew got pushed into the portal from behind and landed in a long stone corridor lit by torches. On the end of the corridor waited a large dark brown door for him. Matthew cast Hectego, while also maintaining his echolocation minimap. He slowly started to walk through the corridor, as suddenly from his right side he heard a click, and a volley of arrows flew straight at his hexagon shield. His shield easily resisted the first attack without any loss in stability. While continuing through the corridor there were a few more arrow attacks, once even from every side. But his shield was able to block all of them. Then suddenly he heard a swish sound from the top, and flames attacked the top side of his shield. After a few seconds, they stopped. Matthew needed to recast his shield since the attacks wore it down considerably. With a fresh shield he continued to the door. As he reached the door he saw a turn to the left which wasn't visible before. He couldn't watch far into the corridor since there were no torches, it was completely dark. Another swish and a black arrow approached his shield, his instinct told him to dodge. He barely managed to dodge the arrow as it shattered his shield. These were no normal arrows, they were apparently enchanted. He quickly tried to open the door into the next room but it was locked. He quickly jumped backward back into the corridor as he just heard another arrow, impacting the wall just behind where he stood moments ago. That was dangerous. He breathed out as he tried to summon the arrow with an accio. It didn't work. He tried to levitate it, which also didn't work. After trying to cast the spells on something else, he concluded that really only self-created spells were working in this place. How does this even work? Maybe it's some kind of intent-based wards, or these are specific wards targeting every spell practiced in school. He mused while trying to carefully pick up the black arrow while hiding behind the corner. Inadu. He cast and a string of information appeared inside his mind. Beep. Basic analysis complete. Enchantments recorded. Multiple enchantments and runes were detected. The arrow is a magical construct enchanted with the power to break magic below a certain level. While impacting the hexagon shield it breaks one of the shields and disrupts the structure of the whole shield. It only works one time. Ha, I directly found a weakness to my new shield spell. Good that I prepared myself for that eventuality. He muttered while resummoning his shield and entering the corridor around the corner again. As another black arrow flew at him he summoned a small hexagon shield on its trajectory. The black arrow broke through the small shield and continued to fly at Matthew. But it got repelled by the large hexagon shield without trouble since its enchantment was already used up. That way he passed through the corridor while sensing approaching arrows with his echolocation and disabling the magic-breaking enchantments with his small shields. At the end of the dark corridor, an armored archer holding a bow appeared. With a quick dark-piercing charm through the had, he disposed of the archer. As it fell to the ground it began to dissipate. Also a magical construct. It seems if there is enough damage it disappears, he concluded while observing the effect. But honestly, what is with this level design? Did I suddenly land in Dark Souls? Complained Matthew dryly. At the end of the corridor, he only found a wall. Do I have to break down the door? Asked Matthew himself while looking around. Suddenly he spotted on the floor where the archer dissipated a key. He picked the key up and returned to the door. It fit without trouble into the old-looking keyhole. He carefully opened the door and tried to see what was behind it. His echolocation was only able to perceive a large empty room. He couldn't see inside since the whole room was dark. While staring into the blackness he complained, I should have brought my potions. As he carefully stepped into the room, slowly further and further. The door closed by itself and the whole room lit up. Suddenly filled with light, the room turned out to be a Colosseum-like arena. It easily had a radius of 200 meters. While observing the room, Matthew suddenly heard the arrogant voice of the bronze eagle somewhere. He couldn't locate from where. It sounded as if it was all around him. Welcome, challenger, to the Grand Ravenclaw Arena. After passing through the qualification round, you won the right to challenge the arena. But be warned, in this stage you could lose your life. Previously, although it looked dangerous, you were in no danger since no attack would actually harm you. But in this final trial, your life is at stake. So, do you want to continue or run away? Shitty bird. Are you sure I am here right for the Ravenclaw trial? Isn't it more like a Gryffindor trial? He complained inside his mind while answering, no. I came so far. I will also pass this last trial. Prove your worthiness, challenger. All you have to do is survive every wave and kill the final boss. You still only can use your self-created spells. Good luck, young heir, explained the eagle. After he finished, suddenly more magical constructs appeared in the arena. The first wave consisted of 5 armored archer, 10 swordsmen, and 5 axe wielders. The archers instantly shot a volley of arrows. Luckily these weren't the black arrows. His shield blocked the arrows, as the first enemy appeared before him. With an almighty push he catapulted the close-range fighters into the wall. The damage was enough to dissipate most of them. He disposed of the few survivors and the archers with a few targeted dark-piercing curses. After the first wave was cleared he had a few minutes to take a breath. He had to kill another 9 waves, which became increasingly more difficult to handle. In the second wave shield bears additionally appeared. They could block his dark-piercing curse a few times. To kill them efficiently he had to flank them and attack them from the sides. Later the archers started to shoot black arrows again. He either had to dodge them or block them. But with the end of the echolocation spell, he was able to react to them. In the last wave, he basically had to fight a whole army of magical constructs. After a hard and long battle, because they learned to strategize in the last wave instead of blindly attacking him, he finally cleared the last wave. He could rest for around 15 minutes before a large light appeared in the middle of the room. The boss was here. With a loud roar it announced itself. What was the last boss? Well, as expected for a Gryffindor trial, a Ravenclaw trial, it needed to be a big fucking silver blue dragon. The final boss of the Ravenclaw trials was a Swedish short snout. Rowena Ravenclaw expected a second-year student to handle a dragon to be worthy of her inheritance. He really landed in Dark Souls. Chapter 30, Finishing the Trial. The silver blue dragon, which was sought out for its attractive skin, not that it mattered since it was a magical construct, stared down at Matthew. It suddenly put its head slightly backward and breathed in. "Shithrit!" cried out Matthew as he realized what was about to happen. He jumped out of the way, just as the Swedish short snout breathed a volley of blue flames out of its snout. His shield should be able to tank the flames of most dragons, but the short snout was known for its powerful flames. Luckily its scales were less resistant to magic and weaker than the scales of other dragon breeds. Matthew shot one of his dark piercing curses at the dragon's body and was able to destroy a few of its scales. Apparently, they were still able to tank his curse, but get damaged in the process. The room wasn't large enough for the dragon, which usually lived in the wild uninhabited Swedish mountain area, to take off to flight. So he chooses to attack Matthew with one of his silver blue arms. He repelled the dragon's attack, with an almighty push which made the dragon stumble and fall backward. Directly shooting a few dark piercing curses at the Swedish dragon's body, he managed to harm the flesh on the dragon's body. The dragon was clearly weakened at this point. In a last-ditch effort it tried to once again hit Matthew with a desperate fire breath. Matthew wouldn't be able to dodge the blue flames in time. So he cast an almighty push again and slowed the dragon fire down, and continued to weaken it with many small shields before it finally impacted his large hexagon shield. In the end, the shield was able to resist the weakened dragon fire, although it broke down afterward. Before the Swedish short snout was able to get up and attack again, Matthew started to attack with as many dark piercing curses as he could cast. The volley of curses penetrated through the dragon's body like through Swiss cheese, and the magical dragon construct finally started to dissipate. Matthew, who was out of magical energy, leaned exhausted against the wall, as he heard the high and mighty voice of the shitty bronze eagle again. "Congratulations, challenger, for passing the final trial of Ravenclaw. You succeeded where many have fallen before and became an heir of Rowena Ravenclaw herself," explained the eagle. "Follow me back to the entrance hall," said the eagle as another blue swirling portal appeared before Matthew. After stepping through the portal, he arrived at the large empty hall again where the bronze eagle statue waited for him. Nothing inside the hall was different from before. He hoped that there actually was a reward, and this wasn't some kind of sick personal entertainment for a 1,000-year-old magically brought to life eagle statue. You gained the right to access the books personally written by Rowena Ravenclaw herself. The books are hidden in a place you are already very familiar with. The Room of Requirements was created by Lady Rowena. Only you will be able to access the rewards. Nobody else will be able to enter the room with you," explained the eagle. "All you have to wish for is the secret reward room of Rowena Ravenclaw and it will appear. No, leave, challenger, and get some rest," explained the eagle while another blue glowing portal appeared and Matthew got pushed through it. Matthew landed again in the Ravenclaw common room. He decided he would check out the rewards tomorrow after his study session with the first years. For now, he decided to turn in for the night, since he was as exhausted as if he fought a dragon. Which he did. Scene break. After a long Friday of lessons and helping the first years with their homework, Matthew was finally able to approach the Room of Requirements. He passed 3 times before the entrance while wishing for the secret reward room of Rowena Ravenclaw. This time a blue glowing door appeared on the wall. After opening it, he found himself inside a large palace-like hall with 3 pedestals in the center. On the pedestals rested 3 different books. They looked ancient and were bound in an elegant-looking blue leather cover. The first book was called The Secrets of Space by Rowena Ravenclaw. After scanning it with his scanning spell, he found out it was about Rowena's research into the concept of space. It explained here different knowledge about apparition, portkeys, and different other topics of space. Additionally, it was explained how to create the blue portals. Although they were bound to the user's level of power and at his level pretty short range, he still could teleport through Hogwarts and would be able to redirect attacks and spells, even the unforgivables, after mastering it. He also learned how to create it with runes. The next book was called Magical Constructs and How to Control Them by Rowena Ravenclaw. It explained the concepts of how to create magical constructs, with and without runes. After mastering it, the caster would be able to create and manipulate different kinds of magical constructs, similar to the hard light creations of different comic superheroes like Green Lantern of DC, but just less powerful, since the art was very complex. Rowena only worked out the theory of how to cast them without runes. She could only use runes for it. But the theory would be very useful in the future. Last but not least, was the book that piqued Matthew's interest the most. It was called Mind and Soul by Rowena Ravenclaw. After scanning it with his spell, he found out that Rowena Ravenclaw deeply researched the mind and through it the soul. She found out that the consciousness of a person was located inside the soul. Without the soul, a person would be only an empty, although physically working husk. The knowledge was not only stored inside the brain but also the soul. She deeply researched the topic of souls, including Horcruxes, and developed a safe method to create an artificial consciousness. The Sorting Hat and Bronze Eagle were created based on the knowledge of this research. Her magna opus was something called a soul seed. It was an artificial seed cultivated over years by one's own soul, imbued into an object similar to a Horcrux but still different. Its purpose wasn't immortality but to pass on the knowledge of the caster. It created something similar to Sarah, an AI created by a part of the caster's soul, although not as powerful as Sarah. Something that Rowena Ravenclaw did, she created an artifact that would grant the wearer wisdom. Yes, the diadem of Rowena Ravenclaw not only contained a Horcrux of Voldemort but also a soul seed of Rowena Ravenclaw. Besides that, the book also contained a lot of theories about souls and their workings. These new pieces of information brought Matthew a lot of new ideas for the future, but first of all, he needed to complete his database of Hogwarts library. For the rest of the day, he practiced creating different portals inside the room of requirements until late into the night. After he was sure that everyone was asleep, he opened a portal before his dorm room door and stepped through it. Nice, this will save me a lot of time, he thought as he entered his shared room and prepared himself for sleep. Before falling asleep, he gave Sarah a last order for the day. Sarah, start improving occlumency. Add also the newly gained knowledge to it and everything we gathered inside the database, he requested mentally while falling asleep. Task confirmed. Starting magic improvement process. Estimated time of completion, 25 days 8 hours 34 minutes. Well, that will take a while. Doesn't matter, I still have a few thousand books to scan, he thought as he fell asleep. Chapter 31, Quidditch and Life. On Saturday, Matthew's friends dragged him out of the library where he was scanning as many books as possible while pretending to look for a book to read. Today was the first Quidditch match of the year, which traditionally happens on the 2nd November of the school year. Roger successfully joined the Quidditch team this year, as a chaser. Although Matthew escaped the Quidditch matches last year because they weren't interesting for him, he should at least support his friend at his matches. After all, he would probably also watch some matches in the coming years. Especially the one with the important canon events, like Kirill Mort cursing Harry from his broom or the Dementors from Azkaban attacking Potter. At these events he could gather data on Voldemort and if the Dementors from Azkaban are different from the ones Ratchedian summoned. At breakfast, they had to support Roger, who was visibly nervous for his first match against Hufflepuff, who also had a new seeker, Cedric Diggory. Don't worry. If you fall from your broom, a teacher may be able to catch you. If not, as long you are not dead, Madame Pomfrey will be able to fix you. Matthew tried to cheer him up, miserably. Thanks for making my anxiety worse, replied Roger with a deadpan expression. Oh, come on, Roger. Did you ever fall from your broom before? As long they don't malfunction, which is unlikely since you got a new one, nothing will happen, said a smiling Harold. Yeah, you guys are right. I am worrying over nothing here, answered Roger while finishing his breakfast. I wouldn't say anything. It's a game for suicidal people, thought Matthew while imagining the Quidditch games from canon while saying, yeah, don't worry. You will do fine. Thanks, mates. I need to hurry. The team is meeting directly after breakfast for a strategy meeting, finished Roger quickly while leaving the breakfast table. His friends watched him leave the Great Hall as Blake said, damn, I also want to join the team. Next year I will definitely make it. He didn't pass the Quidditch trials this year, as he participated in them with Roger. An older Ravenclaw student bested him during their match-up. Tilda scene break tilde. The Hogwarts Quidditch pitch was built like the professional ones. It was an oval-shaped field 150 meters in length and 25 meters in width. A 1-meter wide circle was marked in the center of the pitch. At each end, there were 3 hooped goalposts of different heights, surrounded by a scoring area. Since Quidditch was an aerial sport, the spectators' areas were on multiple high towers surrounding the pitch. Fun fact: Quidditch was in earlier times called Quidditch and Quaiditch. It was an unbalanced game basically centered on one player, the seeker, who would score 150 points by catching a small golden ball which would also end the game. As if the game was created in a fictional work to give the main character of said work something he was good at, since magic clearly wasn't an option. The rest of the team had to score 15 goals into the 3 loops of the enemy team, to score a similar amount of points, as every goal gave 10 points. The only actually entertaining part of the game was the 2 steel balls called bludger, which were enchanted to target the players, so they could fall a few hundred meters from their brooms into the depth, and become a nice and meaty splatter on the floor. To protect their teams there were 2 players, who were called beaters, who with baseball bat-like tools are trying to hit the bulges on the enemy team. What a nice game! Unlike this entertaining description of what could happen in this game, the actual game was pretty boring. In the end, Ravenclaw won their first game 240-110 through their 7th-year seeker catching the snitch. Since they were previously 20 points behind, Hufflepuff and Cedric were still inexperienced. Although on a side note, Roger scored 5 times, more than the other Ravenclaw chasers together. House Ravenclaw threw afterward an actually decent party for a house of bookworms. They even sneaked some butterbeer and fire whiskey in from Hogsmeade. Matthew was at least able to taste the butterbeer, which actually tasted quite nice, unlike the recipes from the internet of his previous life. Who came on the idea that cream soda mixed with butter would taste nice is an absolute mystery for Matthew. The real thing tastes a bit like less sickly butterscotch and also had a bit of alcohol in it. But wizards had a higher natural resistance to it than non-magical people. So it was no problem for his body to drink a bit even at the age of 13. Next year Cho also wanted to join the Quidditch team, which she would succeed in since the Ravenclaw Seeker was already in his last year, and in canon, she was the Ravenclaw Seeker. As it became outside darker and darker, the whole common room became emptier. The students slowly left for their dorm rooms. Harold and Matthew had to carry a drunk Roger into their room since he overdid a bit after his first successful match. Afterward, Matthew also turned in for the night. Scene break. The year progressed at a steady pace further, as it became outside colder and colder. Matthew kept his routine of working out, studying, and scanning the library until he completely scanned the public section of the library. He continued with the forbidden section from the Room of Requirements. Even Professor Snap's potions' old potion books were accessible through the room since they were inside the castle. Matthew was also able to persuade Professor Snape into more detentions, private lessons, after the winter break. By December Matthew completely scanned the books inside the castle and possessed a wider range of information than any other wizard possibly ever could. Unfortunately, Dumbledore removed books on darker topics completely from the castle after becoming headmaster. Matthew would need to look for books especially with further pieces of information about the soul and Horcruxes, somewhere else. Books like Secret of the Darkest Art, although Hermione managed to summon it out of Dumbledore's office before leaving Hogwarts in their 6th year, Matthew wasn't sure if the room just couldn't access the headmaster office or Dumbledore placed them there before his death. So Harry could access further information on Horcruxes for his quest. In the end, he would need to find this kind of information somewhere else, for example in the Black Library. The Blacks were a very old family and probably collected even books that weren't available in Hogwarts. He would need to break into Grimmauld Place 12 before Sirius breaks out of Azkaban. Sirius would definitely destroy the library to spite his family. Since it wasn't the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix at this point in time, Matthew was able to remember the location and name because the Fidelius charm wasn't there. But as the Blacks were an old family, they still would have a lot of ancient wards protecting their main seat. But Matthew had Sarah and still over 3 years to prepare and also knowledge over the canon, which he tried to keep intact while reaping as many benefits as possible. Nobody knew he would act from the shadows. He just was a talented Muggle-born student like Hermione, which would put him in the good graces of many people in Hogwarts. He already had a plan for multiple break-ins in the future. Damn, he was becoming a thief. As time passed, it finally became December. While he continued with his routine and improved his relationship with many students, a week before he would leave for the winter break, he heard Sarah's familiar voice again with a notification. Chapter 32, Occlumency and Winter. Beep. Magic improvement process finished. New occlumency theory created. Instead of the normal basic method of controlling one's emotions, and emptying the mind where the user protects his mind from mind-reading attempts and is even able to create real-looking fake memories after mastering it. The improved method is split into 3 parts for normal practitioners. The host can use the 4th part uniquely working only for him. Heard Matthew as Sarah loaded the new information into his mind. His improved occlumency consisted not only of defending through controlling his thoughts and emotions, but also controlling one's soul. Through this expanded method, one would be able to create permanent defenses inside the practitioner's mind space. Which was the first part. The second part consisted of training someone's mind into using efficient thinking pathways with the help of a spell, which would accelerate the thought processing speed and enhance how much the practitioner would be able to access his brain capacity. Normal humans would be only able to access only 10%, while wizards, thanks to their magic, enhancing their biology around 15%, although they don't really use it thanks to the lack of common sense and logic. But a practicer of his new occlumency would be able to access over 30% of one's brain capacity, the limit of the current human's evolutionary progress. Far more complex and hard to learn or even master was the third part. It will allow the Pratyana to control one's soul. Basically, it allows channeling the energy a soul naturally generates into the practitioner's thought processes and mental defenses, enhancing them further. If someone theoretically is biologically able to use 100% of one's brain capacity, the practitioner could surpass this natural limit. According to the theory Sarah worked out, the caster would be able to even leave one's body with his soul, but he still didn't possess enough data to accomplish this. And last but not least was the fourth part unique for him, or someone with similar circumstances. It was a method to use the AI chip as a side processor. At the moment he and Sarah were two separated existences. He just gave Sarah a task and would get a solution, but the fourth part allowed him to access Sarah and enhance his thought processes and defenses with Sarah as basically a second processor core, if he would explain it computing terminology. He would be able to focus on two things simultaneously. But to start he still had to gain control over his emotions and thoughts. Luckily Sarah was able to create a meditation technique that allowed him to finish this process in a few weeks, instead of months or years of the original technique. So Matthew added from now on, the week before winter holidays, meditation before going to sleep to his routine. Scene break. On Friday afternoon before leaving the castle with the Hogwarts Express, he entered the forest again. To get more combat experience and gather more resources he began to hunt for acromantulas. He spent the whole weekend inside the forest hunting in the forest. Additionally, to gather acromantula parts, he was also able to extract the web fluid from them. He also gathered some herbs, unicorn hairs, and different things. Sunday afternoon he returned to the castle and packed his trunk, since on Monday morning they would leave with the Hogwarts Express for London. There was no feast tonight, only normal dinner since it wasn't the end of the year. Early in the morning on Monday the 17th December 1990, the Hogwarts Express left the Hogsmeade platform, with a load of Hogwarts students on board, in direction of London. After travelling for multiple hours the red steam locomotive entered the King's Cross train station. Matthew's parents were already waiting for him on platform 9¾ After greeting his parents, the three-headed family left the station and drove with their car in direction of Charing Cross Road. Matthew entered Diagon Alley by himself while his parents waited in a nearby cafe. He quickly visited Gringotts, where he took the earnings of the potion sales out of his vault. It amounts to around 1,100 galleons. Afterward, he visited the Slug and Jigger's apothecary, where he exchanged some of his gathered materials for other potion ingredients and money. Around 100 galleons he got paid out, additionally to restocking his ingredients, which he regularly used for experimenting and personal use potions like the Night Owl potion. Later he also finished some Christmas shopping and prepared the orders so they would arrive on Christmas Day at his friend's place. For Roger he ordered a broom polishing set. For Harold he got a copy of A Practical Guide to Care for Magical Animals by Lita Scamander. It was written by the daughter of Newt Scamander, the famous Magi zoologist. And for Blake, he got a basic training guide for Quidditch professionals written by the Irish national coach. He also ordered for Cho some fan merch of the Tutshill Tornadoes. For his parents he bought some wizarding sweets. Additionally, he bought at Madame Mackin's shop a nice pair of winter gloves that were enchanted to fit the wearer and kept clean for his mother. For his father he got a copy of the Hogwarts Express. It describes how in 1830, the Ministry of Magic conducted a large-scale operation involving 167 memory charms, as well as the biggest concealment charm ever performed in Britain, to acquire the locomotive. The morning after this operation, the residents of Hogsmeade awoke to find the gleaming red Hogwarts Express and a Hogsmeade railway station that had not been there previously, and the Muggle railway employees in Crewe had the feeling they had misplaced something, which stayed with them for the rest of the year. Additionally, it described how wizards afterward enchanted it so it would drive without any fuel, and always kept maintained. As he finished his business he again joined his parents in the cafe. After a quick meal they returned home where they would prepare for the journey to Amsterdam, or the country of Flanders tomorrow. After packing up, the family turned early to sleep since their flight would start early in the morning from London Heathrow Airport. Scene break. Early in the morning Matthew and his parents called a cab that brought them to the airport where they checked into their flight to Amsterdam. The flight only took a bit over an hour and they landed at the Amsterdam Schiphol airport, where they took another cab and arrived at their hotel in the center of Amsterdam. On the drive, they already saw the many beautiful sights of the city, like the different canals and beautiful houses. After checking into their hotel room and unpacking, they decided to get some refreshments at the hotel's restaurant. In the afternoon they decided to get an overview of the city with a nice boat tour through the canals. They would have enough time to explore the sights since they booked their hotel for the whole 10 days. Matthew would spend the first few days exploring the city with his parents before he would visit the magical parts. They visited many museums like the Van Gogh Museum or the Anne Frank House, and also many different famous locations like the different parks, observation decks, the Central Station, and even the Royal Zoo. While exploring the city Matthew also visited a coffee shop where he exchanged his £3,600 which he previously changed to Dutch guide, into a kilogram of weed which he stored into his trunk under a stasis charm. The first 4 days passed in the blink of an eye with so many places and things to explore. On the 5th day, Matthew finally decided to visit the shopping district of the country of Flanders. Chapter 33, The Country of Flanders. The entrance to the magical shopping district of Flanders, according to Matthew's mappamundi, was located in the Java Street between a stylish souvenir shop and a vintage cafe. Java Street was once a run-down street of Amsterdam, but in recent years it got cared for and became one of the more popular locations in the city. The only run-down shop which gets ignored by the non-magical was another cafe. A cafe for witches and wizards. In reality, it looked like a nice modern coffee shop, unlike the leaky cauldron which was run down outside and inside. The name of the cafe was Koffie van Tovenaarij. Inside the cafe it was bright and inviting. The female shopkeeper led me to a back room that was full of different vinyl records. She tapped with her wand the records in a specific order and they began to fuse together into a black door. The shopkeeper opened it and said, "Welcome to Lohengrin Winkelcentrum," as the shopping district behind the door appeared. It was a large mall. It looked quite modern but also not. Like a steampunk shopping center full of magical products. There were potion shops, bookstores, restaurants and more, but it wasn't as large as Diagon Alley. This is logical since the magical population in Great Britain is bigger than the one in Flanders. First, he checked out the bookstores inside the mall. Their magical knowledge wasn't as developed as in Britain and nothing here could compare to the library in Hogwarts, but he found a few gems which he bought. They were mainly books on herbology and potioneering. The magical community in Flanders is pretty far developed in this area. They even managed to create magical vegetables with a high concentration of magical energy which would enhance the magical energy growth of wizards. He bought a collection of books worth 400 galleons, which he instantly scanned with the help of Sarah, since he made sure to scan Dutch grammatic books and dictionaries at the airport. Sarah was able to directly translate the knowledge inside the books and add it to the database. Beep. Magical grown vegetables may be able to be used as an energy source for low-level potions to grow the magical energy inside host's body. Unlike in common potion ingredients which are mixed with other energies and properties, the vegetables seem to contain pure magical energy although in low quantity. Further data necessary. Finally, I found something to create my first magical energy formula to grow my reserves more quickly. Hopefully, the vegetables are not too expensive, thought Matthew while getting excited. After packing away his new books into his trunk, he left the bookstore and started looking for an apothecary, which he found quickly. As he entered the store he got directly greeted in Dutch, "Welcome young man. How can I help you?" asked a middle-aged shopkeeper behind the counter. Matthew replied with the help of Sarah in broken Dutch, "Hello, I would like to see a list of potion ingredients you have in stock, and your collection of magical vegetables." "The list is no problem. Here you go. As for the vegetables, I don't sell them in my shop. You can find them in one of the food stores inside the mall. A good one with decent prices is the one at the other end on this floor," replied the middle-aged shopkeeper while handing Matthew a paper. Matthew bought a few ingredients that were rare and expensive in Britain but found nothing else of interest. Everything else was also available in Diagon Alley. After leaving the shop he continued through the floor to the other end, until he arrived at a stall with boxes full of different vegetables. Sarah scanned the vegetables, for their magical energy content, requested Matthew while observing the stall. Scan complete. Vegetables can be used as a basis for a magical energy formula. Uploading data. Heard Matthew as a new string of information appeared inside his mind. After he has gone through the data, he decided to approach the vendor. "Hello, I am interested in your selection of vegetables. What are their prices?" he asked in his broken Dutch. "Greetings, sir. I have a list with prices you can check out. You can also order more from me and get it delivered anywhere in Flanders, or you can pick them up in the next few days," answered the friendly vendor. "Thank you, let me first check the prices," said Matthew while checking out the list. He found out that the magical corn was the vegetable with the highest magical energy concentration. Concerning the price, he decided to buy the whole stock and spent all his galleons to order as much corn as possible. Because of the bulk order, he got a nice discount and was able to purchase about half a ton of corn with his remaining money. He could pick it up in 2 days since the vendor first had to order such a large amount. After packing the corn he bought just now into his trunk, he continued onwards. For the rest of the day, Matthew strolled through the Lohengrin Winkelcentrum and did some window shopping. Not much caught his eyes, since the magical communities in Europe, US and Australia are pretty similar, since they have the same origin and use similar products. If he wanted to explore lots of different kinds of magic, he would have to visit Asia, Africa, or South America, since they had a different kind of cultures and developed their forms of magic, before getting influenced by global travelers. After a day of shopping, he returned to the hotel, where he met his parents and they decided to visit a nice restaurant in Amsterdam while telling each other about their days. His parents looked at him strangely as he explained he just bought half a ton of corn. "And how do you plan to bring it with you?" asked his mother as she stared incredulously at him. "Magic," replied Matthew with a smirk on his face. "I have a trunk that weighs almost nothing no matter what's inside and also is larger from inside than from outside. It's a pretty useful piece of magic." He gave a simplified explanation while enjoying his food. "That sounds useful. Don't go overboard, especially with smuggling," said his grinning father, with a half-serious tone while imagining the possibilities. After their meal, they returned to their hotel while taking a nice walk, before going to sleep. The next days nothing much happened. Matthew picked up his order and put it inside his trunk. He decided to visit other locations of Flanders, like taking a tour through their ministry or visiting their national museum. For Christmas, he got a few nice gifts from his friends and parents but nothing noteworthy. Their holidays in Amsterdam and Flanders slowly came to an end. They explored lots of new places and saw interesting things. After leaving their hotel they arrived at the airport one day before New Year's Eve and traveled back to London, where they returned home and enjoyed New Year there. A few days later Matthew sat once again with his friends inside the Hogwarts Express while talking about their holidays. Chapter 34, Back in Hogwarts. Wednesday, the 2nd of January, 1991. The first day of school after the winter holidays passed without trouble. Since Matthew already scanned the whole Hogwarts library, he had to change up his schedule. In the mornings before lessons, he still worked out, to keep his peak human physical shape for his age class. He also trained the martial arts style Sophie created for him, which was perfectly compatible with magic casting. It felt as if he already reached an advanced level, although he still wasn't an expert. Since Sarah improved and created his personal style of occlumency, he meditated every night with the meditation technique he needed to control his mind enough to access his mindscape, something only very advanced occlumens was able to accomplish. The only ones he knew of according to his analysis were Snape, Dumbledore, Voldemort, and probably Grindelwald, who was still imprisoned in Nurmengard Castle. Only this handful of people were able to create mental barriers and fake memories inside their mindscape. Most people who practice occlumency defend their minds only through controlling their thoughts and emotions, which Matthew now also could do. With his improved meditation technique, he would reach higher levels in a few weeks. Lastly, after lessons, he would either practice magic or read, but he completely scanned the Hogwarts library, Ratchedian's small library, and the books he collected in bookshops, so he ran out of new materials for the near future. But he had more theoretical knowledge in magic than anyone. Dumbledore may have more experiences and knowledge in branches he specialized in like transfiguration and alchemy, since he accessed during his long life many different libraries and books, like the ones of Nicholas Flamel as he studied under him. And Voldemort knows more about the dark arts than him, but both of that was temporary since he had already ideas how to gain more knowledge. For now, his best course of action besides practicing magic, which he only can practice wandless not without incantation because he doesn't have enough magical energy at the moment, was to solve that problem. His holidays brought him a starting point. According to Sarah's first simulations, he had to find a way to extract the magical energy from the corn he bought, into a more useful form. The concentration inside the corn was too low to create a meaningful potion. It would just result in an expensive vegetable soup rather than a potion to increase his magical energy reserves. He created a new file he called Azure Corn in honor of Lylin Falia's first spiritual force formula research. So after lessons, Matthew entered the room of requirements where he wished for a potions lab and began experimenting with the different methods Sarah devised to extract pure magical energy. This whole phase of experimenting will take at least a few days. Waiting times he passed with practicing magic in a different part of the room. For his magic, he already mastered up to the 5th year level a student usually learned in Hogwarts. Anything above was hard for him at the moment since it was energy-consuming. Unlike Harry Potter, he was born as an average wizard strength-wise. He could only cast the Patronus charm through his almost perfect control of his magical energy. While Harry had probably masses of power to waste. Sarah, please scan my body and display my stats. I want to know at what level I currently am, requested Matthew during a break a few days after starting his experimentations. Beep. Scan complete. Displaying status. Matthew Mason, Wizard, Rank 1, Strength, 1.8, Agility, 2.0, Vitality, 1.9, Magical Energy, 36.4, Status, Healthy. So my physical stats almost reached the limit a regular human can reach. As for wizards, I already surpass many adults since they don't really work out. But people like Bellatrix Lestrange did keep a good physical body and should surpass me at the moment. But it's only a matter of time since at the moment he can only keep up his routine and let his body grow. After puberty his body should mature and reach the peak. While Voldemort most likely surpassed this level, through rituals since he seems to be very fit for a 70-year-old geezer. Thought Matthew while checking out his current status. Matthew couldn't imagine Voldemort working out, but was this worth the price, looking like an ugly egg, for more strength and powers? After all, he was confident in finding a better method. As for his magical energy level, he already entered the level of third-year students at the end of the year. If he successfully completed Project Azurecorn, he would be able to reach a magical energy level of 80, the peak a wizard can reach before completing puberty, where his body would mature on a physical and spiritual level. Sarah theorized based on her database and scans, that wizards can enter a spiritual maturation besides puberty if they can generate enough magical energy, either through training their magic a lot or high age. Since then many more powerful wizards like the Professors, Aurors, or Death Eaters reached a qualitative change in their magic even without puberty or any rituals. So Matthew should be able to force a maturation before completing puberty by using his potions, which would allow him to reach the level of a rank 3 wizard by the age of 16 by abusing his natural maturation through puberty. He returned to his potion experiments since his current plans rely on their success. Scene break. The next 2 weeks of January Matthew spent most of his time outside school, inside the room of requirements. Well, he still attended the new detentions with Professor Snape and helped the first years studying on Fridays. But the rest of the time he focused on experiments, so he was for large amounts of the day absent from the castle. His experiments still didn't finish, although he managed to extract the magical energy into a liquid. It contained a few impurities from the extraction process, which made it still incomplete. But today, with the help of a small ritual Sarah created as the final step, he would be able to remove the impurities and create the basic ingredient of his Azurecorn potion. After a few hours of processing and purifying the extracted liquid, he finally succeeded in creating 4 vials of pure magical energy liquid, a new ingredient that he named Magical Essence. According to Sarah's analysis, this was the lowest grade of magical essence possible, since the corn was only able to contain this quality of magical energy. But at his current level, this absolutely should be enough to improve his reserves. Now he finally should be able to find the optimal method to induce the magical essence into his body, and increase the reserves. This last step should be easy, he just needed to let Sarah choose the best one since there are multiple possibilities. He needed the one which would bring most of the magical energy inside the magical essence into his system with the least waste. Sarah starts the analysis for the best method, and create the corresponding potion formula he requested mentally after storing the vials with magical essence away. Starting simulation and creation process. Estimated time of completion, 5 days 9 hours 27 minutes. Well, just enough time to rest a bit after these few days of hard work, muttered Matthew as he opened a portal into an abandoned and unused room close to the Ravenclaw Tower. Chapter 35, Protecting the Mind. Well, that was a short break, mused Matthew as he managed to enter his mindscape 2 days later during his daily meditation session. The inside of his mind looked like a universe on its own. A wide dark space full of different colored lights. Some stood still in their positions, some moved through the space. They had many different forms, balls of lights, beams, or thunders. His mind was a chaotic but beautiful place. It was time, to begin with, the final step of the first part of his occlumency technique. His mindscape was a representation of his consciousness, memories, emotions, and personality. Everything that makes him himself. The mindscape can take many different forms. Some may be a building, a maze, a planet, or some other abstract concept. His took a universe-like form. This represented the uniqueness of everyone's mind. To complete the first part of his occlumency technique, he needed to create the outer defense of his mind. The defense should compose of 2 different components. A barrier or shield of some kind to protect the mind from attacks. And a sensory part, to detect subtle attacks and mind-influencing drugs or effects similar to Veritaserum, Amoretia, or the Imperious Curse. The protecting layer could be based on physical or abstract concepts. It didn't matter if it was strong in the real world or it even existed, it could be just a fictional principle. All you needed is to believe it was powerful. He had first to construct his inner mental shield before he could begin constructing his sensory defense. He decided to go with an abstract concept for his defensive layer, an absolute border of his universe fueled by his emotions and cosmic energies inside his universe, which he had perfect control of thanks to his preparatory meditation. Just forming some shields based on real physics wasn't powerful enough for him. Everything, in reality, could break, but the borders of a universe exist until the time it dies. So as long his universe exists, his border protects it. And his universe lives and dies with him. To break into his mindscape they would have to shatter his mind first or kill him. Matthew started the construction of his border by guiding one string of energy out of his universe, fueling a first almost invisible layer of energy. The energy had destructive properties and was harder than anything imaginable. The moment the first layer was formed, he guided another string of energy into another layer. This time he guided some of his emotions into it. He needed now to repeat this process again and again until he felt the border of his universe was complete. Matthew had at the moment no idea how long this would take, but at least a few weeks of building sessions. In one meditative session, he was only able to construct 6 layers that he fused at the end together into one more powerful border filled with chaotic energy protecting his mind. Before he finally fell asleep. Scene break. A few days later the Sarah finally completed the potion formula for his Azure Corn potion. Although it had a 3 weeks brewing process, it was the currently most effective way to strengthen his personal magical energy reserves. It was based on acromantula poison, The poison was very lethal. Once injected into the body, it spread in minutes through it and would kill it. The potion formula would bind the magical essence with the poison and spread it fastly through the whole body. Other components of the potion were there to neutralize the lethal effect and infuse the magical energy into the body. One could only consume the body once a week because the forceful increase in power strained the body massively, and too much of the poison could still become harmful even neutralized. A week was enough for the body to regenerate, and to detoxify. Matthew had enough magical essence to create 12 vials of azure corn potion, which should be more than enough to let himself reach the limit of his body before maturing. Instantly after lessons, he left his friends and entered the room of requirements for the brewing process. Luckily, the potion didn't need to be monitored the whole time. It just takes so long to combine the magical essence with the poison without destroying or wasting it. For the next 3 weeks, Matthew continued his routine. From Professor Snape he also learned how Snape usually tries to create new potion formula, where he picked up a few new tricks here and there. Although his methods were unlike Sarah's pretty time-consuming, since in the end, it came to try and error. He also continued to help the Ravenclaw's first years with their studies. They even came to with a few more complex questions to him, which allowed him to flaunt his knowledge. Once he even taught Cho a few spells again, because she asked him if they could repeat their 1-on-1 spell training session. The days passed and it became February and warmer. While waiting for his potion to complete, he continued building his mental defenses. He already repeated the process of guiding the energies of his universe and emotions into barriers and fusing them into his border a few hundred times. The border of his universe was formed of a dark and chaotic mass of energy, with colorful flashes of lightning swirling through it. Matthew felt he reached the perfect state of it. It would be very hard for anything to pass through it with brute force, since it was bound to his mind itself. Now it was time to construct an outer layer that would allow him to detect subtle attacks, so he could react to them. This would be the final step of the first part of the occlumency technique. Matthew already thought about how he would construct his detection layer. It would be a combination of an invisible mist with many small, almost not perceivable strings inside it connected to his mind. Every attacker would think the strings would be the true detection mechanism, but in reality, they would be just a diversion. The true detection mechanism is the invisible mist made of microscopic particles. Once someone entered it, they would collide with each other and collide with the strings and barrier. So Matthew could detect any kind of intrusion, no matter how subtle it is. The construction process took only a few days. Since its purpose was just detecting intrusion, it doesn't need to be an indestructible barrier. First, he formed the string and connected it to his universe, then another one and another one, until he created a wide net of interconnected strings connected to each other, or his inner mindscape. Next, he started creating the microscopic invisible particles in bulk, all around the web and the border of his mind. He completed the outer mental defenses of his mind a few days before the azure corn potion was ready, and with it the first part of his original occlumency technique. He finally should be ready to scan the scroll he found inside the ruins of Rachidian's Black Castle. But first, he wanted to test the new potion and be in peak condition, since he didn't know what would happen. Chapter 36, Azure Corn Potion. After 3 weeks of brewing the azure corn potion besides lessons, it was finally complete. Matthew used 3 of his 4 vials of his low-grade magical essence and produced 9 dosages of the potion, which according to Sarah's calculations should be enough to reach the peak of a first-rank wizard, or in Wizarding World terms, he would be reaching the peak of a pre-AL student. For the first time he would consume the potion. He waited for the weekend, so he would have enough time to figure out a solution if any problems should occur. He couldn't go to Professor Snape to test his potion. This was something he didn't want to share with anyone since either such potions didn't exist in the wizarding world, he at least never heard in the books or movies of it, or it was family magic, probably one of the greatest secrets of old pure-blood families to secure their superiority. If he asked Professor Snape for guidance, Dumbledore would definitely learn of the potion. Although Dumbledore was a good person, he wasn't sure what kind of crazy ideas he would come up with, for the greater good. He could just force me to give him the formula so he could help Harry become stronger, or he could even share it with all the students, which would force a huge target on Matthew. The purebloods would focus their anger on the Creator, who they also could see as a danger to them. Or even worse, he could just obligate Matthew and keep a close eye on him, so he wouldn't become a Dark Lord or cause more conflict between the purebloods and the rest of the population. All of these were real possibilities since Dumbledore was a good character but perceived in such a way, that in Matthew's past life they created theories and fanfictions that he was some kind of Dark Lord or gone crazy with his greater good, that he would do anything for it. Letting Snape check out the potion was out of the question. He had to trust in Sarah's absolute efficient and logical algorithms that everything was working correctly, even in magic. On Friday afternoon, after his classes and the study session with the first-year Ravenclaw students, he left the common room and secretly sneaked through Hogwarts until he reached the Room of Requirements. Before the tapestry of Barnabas the Balmy where he teaches trolls ballet. He walked 3 times up and down the opposite wall while wishing for a room where he could safely consume the Azucorn potion. He entered the room as the door appeared on the wall. Inside he found a wide room with a comfy bed, a burning fireplace, some chairs, and a table. Matthew took the potion out of his trunk and observed it. It was an azure blue glowing potion, in a lighter color than the magical essence which was dark blue. Sitting down on the bed, he gathered all his resolve and gulped the Azucorn potion down all at once. In the first few minutes, he felt nothing, but suddenly a warm feeling spread through his whole body, into all of his limbs. The warmth became warmer and warmer until it started to burn. His blood felt as if it was burning out his veins. For a moment he thought someone cursed him with the blood-boiling curse. Until he heard through his pain, Sarah's familiar voice inside his mind. Beep. Registering an abrupt rise in host magical energy levels. Calculation in process, 36.6. 37.0. 37.4. 38.3, still rising. 39.8, beep. Warning. Host cells reaching critical damage threshold. Beep. The magical energy level is stabilizing. Registering new magical energy level. Fuck. That hurt like hell. I hope it was at least worth it. Sarah, please scan my body and show me my new status. Requested Matthew while trying to recover from the immense pain. Beep. Host's body scanned. Displaying new status. Matthew Mason, Wizard, Rank 1, Strength, 1.9, Agility, 2.0, Vitality, 2.0, 0.8, Magical Energy, 44.2 status, body damaged on a cellular level. Recommending immediately taking some health potions to assist the body natural recovery rate and starting to rest. Well, that's a nice rise in magical energy, whole 7.8 units with only one potion. I still have another 7, although the potion will be less effective after each time consuming it. But to reach the magical energy limit of 80 that a pre-UL student has before maturing is absolutely possible. Concluded Matthew, while taking some healing potions that he had on stock out of his trunk. Blug. Be it magical or non-magical, medicine always tastes horrible, complained Matthew, while drinking his potions. Afterward, he changed into his sleeping clothes and entered the comfortable-looking bed, and closed his eyes. While his whole body hurt, he slowly fell asleep. His damaged body needed all the rest it could possibly get. Scene break. Matthew woke on Saturday late in the afternoon up. He slept through the whole night and the morning like a stone. After resting, he packed his stuff into the trunk and left the room of requirements for the kitchen, where he got fed by a flock of worried house elves. Afterward, he returned to the Ravenclaw Tower, where he pretended as if everything was okay. But Cho at least must have seen that he was hurt, since she looked at him with worried eyes. "What happened to you?" she asked silently with worry in her voice. "Nothing, no need to worry. It's just a side effect of a training exercise I had to do. It will be healed after a few days," explained Matthew without sharing any details. "I hope so. If not, I will drag you myself to the medical wing and let Madame Pomfrey check you thoroughly," she replied with conviction in her eyes, while staring at him. Okay. No need to trouble Madame Pomfrey. Everything is fine," replied Matthew while joining his friends. He rested the rest of the day with them, until he turned early into sleep. The next 7 weeks passed similarly. He consumed 1 potion every weekend to use the most out of his time. During the weeks he couldn't do much since his body was strained the whole time and always needed time to rest. He only practiced magic during class. In his free time he spent more time with his friends or experimented with different kinds of potions and ingredients. By the blink of an eye, the weeks passed and he finally consumed the last potion. He already endured the pain without any troubles at this point. The last potion only raised his magical energy by 3.3 points. But these few points finally should have helped him to reach the limit of a rank 1 Magus or Pre-Owl students. "Sarah, please scan my new body and display my new status," he requested from the AI chip. Beep. Stats calculated. Displaying new status. Matthew Mason, Wizard, Rank 1, Strength, 2.0, Agility, 2.2, Vitality, 2.4, 1.5, Magical Energy, 81.1, Status, Damaged. Recommended action, rest for the next few days. Yes, finally. Now I only need to train and grow normally in the next few months. A spiritual maturity should happen naturally. It seems the damage from the potion helped to train my vitality. It grew as fast as never before. But I am no masochist, so no training through pain. Since at some point it would also reach the limit naturally. I still need to find a way to surpass the limits of my body," mused Matthew while returning to the Ravenclaw common room to rest for the night. Chapter 37, A Scroll of Sins. Friday, the 26th of April, 1991. After letting his body rest, and return to peak condition, while familiarizing himself with his new magical energy level of a peak Pre-Owl student, Matthew returned to the ruins of the Black Castle inside the inner parts of the Forbidden Forest. Today was the day he would read the scroll he found inside the ruins with the help of Sarah and his scanning spell. He decided to use the Black Castle ruins since he didn't want to alarm Dumbledore or any other teacher if something should go wrong. The ruins were far enough away from the castle, and outside the Hogwarts wards so Dumbledore wouldn't sense anything. As he arrived at the ruins, he opened the hidden entrance with the rune formation and entered into the darkness. Once he arrived at the bottom of the ancient staircase, he entered into one of the rooms which were used as a laboratory once. Inside the room, he began his preparations to scan the scroll. To be as safe as possible, he let Sarah create a rune formation to shield everyone inside it from mental influences from the outside. He placed the scroll outside the formation and stepped back inside it, where he started to meditate to bring his mental defenses to maximal strength possible. "Sarah, is all preparations finished and all contingency plans in effect?" asked Matthew mentally the last time before he would begin to scan the scroll. "Affirmative. All plans are in effect. Rune formation working on maximal efficiency. Mental defenses are as strong as currently possible. Quarantined space inside Mindscape prepared for analyzing the content. Everything ready. Good," breathed Matthew out to calm himself as he began to stare at the scroll. He opened the scroll from afar with a simple wandless spell. The content of the scroll glowed in a dark red and black color, which already looked ominous. Matthew focused with the help of his occlumency on something else so he wouldn't read the contents of the scroll directly. He hoped with all his preparations he wouldn't look like a fool, but even a powerful wizard like Rachidian fell into darkness and became a famous Dark Lord of his time through the scroll's influence, which is apparently only one of many more. Inadu. He cast his self-created scanning spell and directly guided the string of information to the previously prepared quarantined space inside his mind, which is under the control of Sarah. Registering mind-corrupting influence inside the quarantined space and outside the rune formation. Rune formation is successfully keeping the corruption outside. Power is rapidly dropping. The host is recommended to close the scroll again. Beginning analysis and removal of the corrupting influence inside the quarantined space. The rune formation is glowing brightly, but the light became dimmer and dimmer. He focused himself and tried to close the scroll wandless again. But dark red pulsating energy was emitted by the scroll, and he felt a strong resisting force against his magical reserves. Matthew fought against that power with all he got. He felt his magical energy reserves depleting very fast, but the scroll slowly began to roll up again. But suddenly the rune formation he carved into the floor, which was protecting him from mental attacks, broke down. Warning. Detecting mind attack. Pausing all tasks. All processing power assisting host's mental defenses. Shit. What is that? Exclaimed Matthew as he felt an infinitely powerful force attacking his mental shields. All he could perceive was a gigantic shadow with glowing red eyes attacking his mental shields. The being felt ancient, and it seems to be only a tiny fraction of its power. He never heard of anything comparable in the Harry Potter universe. Maybe the only being that would be similar was Death from the story of the three brothers. But this being felt too malevolent to be death. Death was just death, neither good nor evil. But this felt like absolute evil. Only with the help of the AI chip he was able to resist it. His defenses were approaching a critical point very rapidly. In a last-ditch effort, Matthew used his wand to focus every drop of magical energy inside his body in direction of the scroll. Just as his mental shields shattered into countless pieces layer for layer, he managed to close the scroll and the dark presence attacking him vanished. Fuck, my head is hurting. This was a really close call, thought Matthew as he inside his mindscape watched the last layer of his mental shields surrounding his mind universe, standing. Cracked but still standing. What was that? That definitely wasn't a wizard. It seems the world of Harry Potter isn't as simple as only some wand-waving wizards casting spells and a few magical beasts only known from mythology. There seem to be much more powerful beings out there, concluded Matthew while thinking of that being. Sarah, continue removing the mental influence inside the quarantined area. I really want to know what was written inside that scroll. Maybe they are something like the Necronomicon from H.P. Lovecraft or the Darkhold from Marvel. Wait. Sarah, was there any mention of the Necronomicon inside the Harry Potter books or movies playing inside the Wizarding World? The Necronomicon was used by many fictional works, maybe also in Harry Potter, thought Matthew as he asked Sarah in anticipation. Beep. Search complete. No results were found. No mention of the Necronomicon inside any official Harry Potter and affiliated official works. Only some fanfictions hosts read in the past used it. It's unlikely the scroll is part of the Necronomicon. So that wasn't it. Well, it was a possibility. From what I saw at the moment, I am not inside a fanfic version of Harry Potter. At least from what I could tell for now. The goblins weren't using their ridiculous made-up greetings with the overflowing gold and so on which most fanfiction used. Couldn't see anything that made Dumbledore an evil Dark Lord. Just a powerful old man who is getting into the years. Concluded Matthew while thinking about all the fanfic clichés which came into his mind. Well, doesn't matter for now. I need to be careful of that being. But its power, that's something I want. There seem to be more scrolls if Azkaban and its Dementus are a clue. Sophie continues with the analysis while I rest and try to rebuild my mental defenses. Ordered Matthew as he walked out of the room into the other room which served as a bedroom in the past. He quickly cleaned the room and took out bed stuff while preparing a makeshift bed for himself. Matthew placed himself on his simple bed and started to meditate. He rebuilds his mental defenses part for part. Since he already did it once, he was able to rebuild them faster than before. Again he guided the energies inside his mental universes to the border and formed shields out of them. He also used the shattered splitters of his old defenses and strengthened his new ones with them. By using the old and new ones, he created his shields more powerful than before. While meditating deep into the night, he managed to rebuild already a fourth of his shields. Exhausted from the stress of today, he fell quickly asleep. The next morning he heard Sarah's voice inside his mind. Beep. Analysis complete. All mental influences were identified and erased. Ready to integrate the scroll's knowledge into host's database. Proceed. Why would I hesitate? All the danger would have been a waste of time. Yes, do it, Sarah. Requested Matthew, and a large string of information appeared inside the database of his mind. Chapter 38, The First Words of Chaos. This scroll of sin contained a pretty wide range of different knowledge. For once it introduced the basics of a language spoken in another dimension which name wasn't specified. Rachidian tried to translate the name of the language but did it wrongly. Instead of Dark Tongue it was Chaos Words, or the First Words of Chaos. An ancient language particularly used in a wide collection of dimensions with inhabitants of a darker nature which were connected. The runic system of Chaos Words was a particularly powerful one. Sarah and Matthew came to the theory that runic systems, the more user they had and the older they were, became more powerful since the old age and usage imprints themselves into the magical force of the universe itself. An ancient language as old or older as magic should be able to control every bit of magical energy inside the universe, or even the universe itself. He currently only had access to language a few thousand years old. Although old for humanity on the large scale of the universe itself, they were very young and new languages. But the first words of chaos may even predate mankind if the dark ancient being that attacked his mind gave any clue. It wasn't human. Matthew compared it with programming languages since he studied in his last life computer science. With a language like Python or Java he could do a lot of things, but still only on the surface level. This were the language mankind currently had. But the Chaos Words were basically a language that was able to influence deeper parts of the universe. Like C or C++ could control the processor more freely, but all of them were far more complex. Somewhere out there should be an assembly language for magic itself, that could control the very fabric of reality itself, that Matthew would find in the future. After all, a magic user was like a programmer. Instead of manipulating a computer, he manipulates the world, universe, or reality itself. The possibilities with the Chaos Words were already endless for what he could accomplish previously. And only he in the history of the wizarding world had free access to use them without falling into the darkness and being controlled or enslaved by some foreign being. With spells based on the Chaos Words he should be able to overpower the spells based on the languages of mankind, although the amount of magical energy someone put into his magic was also a large factor. Unfortunately, the scroll only contained the basics of the language itself. More of it he should be able to find on other scrolls, which he was a bit scared of. He believes the dark shadow that attacked his mind only did so unconsciously with only a part of its power contained inside the scroll. But now that he successfully accessed the scroll while resisting its control, he may have alarmed that powerful ancient being. Next time there could be a full conscious attack, or even it would be able to use more of its power. Before he began to read the next language he would have to become more powerful and better prepared. With the help of the knowledge inside the scroll, he now had an idea to accomplish something that he wanted to do from the beginning but hadn't had the right tools for. But now he had gained the tools. All he needed now was to research and prepare. The rest of the knowledge of the scroll was about summoning weaker beings from another dimension and controlling them. The name of the dimension wasn't specified inside the scroll, but it was implied that there was a scroll with the knowledge of summoning more powerful beings. Maybe he would find the name there. Controlling them was actually a trap itself. According to the analysis of Sarah, the summoner didn't control the beings. Instead, he used his soul to channel the dark being controlling the user of the scroll, to order the summons. Maybe Matthew could create a way to control them himself, since he gained now a deeper understanding of creatures like Dementus and Lethifolds which were summoned with the scroll. This would be useful for breaking into Azkaban and exploring it, or when Voldemort returned and struck a deal with the Dementus. After comprehending all the new pieces of information he returned into the room where the scroll was still laying on the floor. He levitated it carefully into his trunk. Before leaving the room and summoning his Patronus, he once again suppressed the Dementus, this time without trouble since he was far more powerful than before, and entered into the inner part of the underground ruins, the library. Once again he levitated the scroll onto the pedestal. With the help of Sarah, he created runic formations, to protect the scroll from outsiders and hide it, and to keep its influence inside. The scroll itself was indestructible and too powerful. One of the most dangerous items he ever heard of, even more than a Horcrux. Since he couldn't destroy it, he had to hide and protect it. After rigging the room with runic traps, also some of them based on Chaos Words, he left it once again and returned through the hall full of Dementus. Once he arrived outside the black door, he carved another rune formation around the door rune mechanism, effectively locking it, so only he could open it. Although it was possible to overpower it, only powerful wizards could accomplish it. At least peak rank 3 wizards like the Hogwarts teachers, or Bellatrix Lestrange were needed. Since he had packed all his stuff, and completed everything he wanted to do here, for now he once again climbed the stairs upwards to the exit. As he arrived, he carved a rune formation connected to him inside the door so he would feel if someone opened it. After testing out if the formation worked, he left the ruins once again into the dark clearing. After making sure the entrance was closed, he disillusioned himself and began his return to the castle. Through the leaves of the trees inside the forbidden forest, he could see it was already afternoon. After an hour's walk, he arrived once again in the castle. First, he returned to the common room, where he freshened up before he began looking for his friends. After he found them in the library doing their homework, he joined them, since he didn't finish his homework before. And so his life returned to normal. He almost accomplished everything he wanted this year, only one thing remained. The weeks passed and the end of the year came closer and closer. He spent his time experimenting with his new knowledge. Matthew hoped that with the help of the Chaos Words he should be able to remove the trace on his wand. Since he wanted to practice and use magic at home without looking for a desolate place, somewhere without people, Sarah created a runic formation based on the Chaos Words which should help him remove the trace. It was a general purification ritual, one of the basic rituals not of dark nature, but still forbidden since rituals were just declared too dangerous by the ministry because they had no control or understanding of it. It was still one of the few rituals he found in Hogwarts since most of them were removed from the school. This ritual was designed to remove foreign magic influences on objects which weren't part of its natural magic. Normally it was too weak to remove the trace. But his ritual was written in Chaos Words runic system, it was more powerful than the normal version. After placing his wand inside the formation, he began to channel his magic into it. The runes began to glow in red color, the surface of his wand also began to radiate this color. Beep. Foreign magic on host wand is becoming weaker. 70%, 55%, 32%, 14%, 3%. Purification was successful. Host's wand is now free of the trace. Finally, even the last thing he wanted to accomplish was finished. For the last few weeks, he had enough time to experiment with anything he wanted. He couldn't grow his magical energy at the moment since the limit was reached, and his spiritual maturation should happen naturally. He scanned all the books in Hogwarts, maybe only the ones inside the Chamber of Secrets were missing if there were any, for that he would need Parseltongue. Forest was explored, only the hideout of the Acronmantulas remained, and he didn't want to fight a flock of giant spiders at the moment. So for now it was just free research and experimentation. Chapter 39, Pathways of the Mind. At the start of May, Matthew decided it was time to start training in the second part of his personal occlumency technique. The part in which he raises the efficiency of his brain, where he unlocks over 30% of his brain's potential, and with it strengthens his mental defenses and thought processing speed. The second part of the technique is split into 3 steps. Every step consists of applying the same spell on his brain, for around 2 months. After 2 months, he casts the spell again slightly different from the original spell. The spells physically block the inefficient pathways his thoughts would take and forces them into the efficient ones. It's a complex piece of magic, carefully created with the help of Sarah to rewire his brain. The disadvantage is that his thoughts and control over his body are greatly reduced during the process. Especially while beginning the training, the application is also mildly painful and will cause a slight migraine for a few days. But thanks to his consumption of the azure corn potion, pain is something he already is accustomed to. As for the limit on his mental functions, with the help of Sarah, he can circumvent the inconvenience partially. But the next 6 months, will be a slight pain in the ass. Well, no pain, no gain. Since his original control over his magic is also limited, he should be able to raise his control again, and after removing his spell, he would be able to acquire perfect control over his magic. Matthew entered the room of requirements, so nobody could disturb the application of the spell. If he were disrupted, it could end up fatally for him, if something went wrong. Once again he was inside the room with the simple bed and a lit fire at the wall. The spell consisted of 2 parts, a rune formation to keep all disruption outside magical or non-magical, and the actual application of the spell on the caster's brain. Matthew didn't need to use chaos words for the runes since the normal version was already enough. After carving the formation into the floor and activating it with his magical energy, Matthew placed himself in the center of the formation in a comfortable position on the floor. He took his dragon hearthstring wand out, and began to cast while carefully channeling his magic at a constant pace, Efficus metus mendis, Donk per fisher. He felt as slowly a pressure was raising onto his brain. His thought speed became slower, and slight pain appeared in the front part of his head. But it was nothing he couldn't live with. As the pressure stabilized and he no longer needed to channel his magic, he put his wand away and raised from the floor. First, he tried how much his mental faculties were impaired. He still could control his limbs without much trouble, but he felt that there was a minimal delay. Next, he tried to calculate inside his head, which was apparently much harder for him than previously. There was also now a small but constant headache, which he had to endure for now. But he could communicate with Sarah without trouble, and she could assist him and access his database instantly since she already used the perfect pathways of his mind. He shouldn't abuse Sarah since it would only take longer to acclimate to the spell and the perfect pathways if Sarah solved everything for him. Next, he wished for a practice dummy to use inside the room of requirements, so he could familiarize himself with his magic control again. He started with his collection of first-year spells and continued upwards towards the later years. His control was completely messed up. Although he managed to cast the spells, they cost at least double the amount if not triple the amount of magical energy. This would be one of the main focus points for the next weeks of his training in his free time. After finishing checking out the aftermath of his spell and practicing some magic, he returned to the Ravenclaw common room for the night. Scene break. The days passed by, and everyone started to focus on their own studies since the end-of-year exams were coming closer and closer. He stopped helping the first years on Fridays since it became more difficult to find a time where everyone could come together to study since they all had their own different study groups with their friends. He only studied together with his friends Ocho and sometimes her friend Marietta. Yes, the Marietta who would get a new face styling by Hermione in her 5th year, because of her big mouth. While the older years focused on their O.W.L.S and N.E.W.T.S, the whole castle became increasingly silent, but with a stressed atmosphere. If Matthew didn't participate in lessons or was studying with his friends Ocho, he spent his time inside the room of requirements, practicing different spells from before the 5th year, and perfecting his magical control. The headache slowly subsided over the weeks, and his thought processes became faster and his control improved. But they would worsen again when he applies the next level of the spell since this was only the beginner level. At the end of May, it was finally time for the exams again. Although he was slightly impaired, he felt he would get outstanding in most of his exams, even in theory. Besides history, although he knew all the dates and events, they still needed to interpret the events for their meanings and consequences. This was something you couldn't just memorize and was hard to do if you hadn't much interest in this topic. although he still got an exceeding expectations, when the results came out at the start of June. After the second-year students got their results, all of them had a small meeting with their head of house about their electives next year. "Mr. Mason, welcome. Please sit down," squeaked Professor Flitwick excitedly as Matthew entered his office. "Thank you, Professor," replied Matthew politely as he sat down on a blue, comfy chair on the other side of Professor Flitwick's desk. "So Mr. Mason, all seems in order. You just need to elaborate your choices for formality reasons so that everything is right," began Flitwick while reading a piece of pergament he took from the top of a pile of different papers. This was the form Matthew had to fill out previous to this meeting to choose his electives. "Well, I choose arithmancy and ancient runes, since they were the most complex topics possible to choose in the third year. So if I had any questions, I could directly visit the teacher of this class without trouble. Like you already know, Professor, I have already a wide range of knowledge about these topics, but the personal experiences of the professors are invaluable to master their classes. The older students have told me I could participate in all our exams, and later NUT exams, even if I didn't participate in the classes before. So I only choose 2 classes. It didn't seem to be possible from my calculations to pick up all classes, since a day just has a limited amount of hours," explained Matthew his reasoning. "Excellent, Mr. Mason. Yes, you can indeed participate in all exams even without participating in the classes. Just visit me in your 5th and 7th year to fill out the necessary paperwork. Your choices seem to be the most logical based on your preferences. You don't seem to have the inner eye for divination and would just waste your time. You also don't seem the magical creature type of person, and your knowledge of the Muggle world far exceeds anything taught in Muggle studies." "Perfect. That's all for today, Mr. Mason. Thank you for coming by," squeaked the small professor happily as Matthew stood up and left the office. Chapter 40, The End of Second Year. After his exams and the selection of next year's electives, Matthew hadn't much to do anymore for this year. He didn't want to risk entering the Room of Lost Things, where a lot of books, treasures, and maybe cash waited for him. The Horcrux, or rather Horcruxes in general, were sentient. He didn't have enough information about their exact capabilities since he didn't find any books specific on Horcruxes or didn't experiment on them yet. Next year was Kirill Mort in the castle. Although thanks to his split soul he was mad, he still was a capable and intelligent wizard. The only thing that suffered under his split soul was his humanity. So he would most likely, if he was aware enough in his wraith state, check if his Horcrux was still in the room. And maybe the Horcrux could communicate with the main soul, and tell him that its location wasn't longer safe if Matthew entered the Room of Lost Things before. If Matthew just takes the Horcrux now, that would alarm Voldemort even more, and he would move and protect his Horcruxes even more. And Matthew would lose his canon knowledge advantage before he even could really use it because everything would change. That was a scenario he absolutely wanted to prevent. But besides perfecting his magical energy control, he could prepare for the Philosopher's Stone. He didn't want to use it for immortality or gold, but he still wanted to study it. He didn't know if the stone was only placed behind the traps during the Christmas holidays after Harry found the Mirror of Erist, or it lay there basically unprotected. The other traps were no challenge for him, a few first years could pass them. Animating a music instrument to pass Fluffy the Cerberus was no problem at his level. He conjured a violin, and after a short afternoon of practice, he was able to animate it to play different kinds of melodies. So he could pass the traps at the start of the year and check the stone out if it was already there. The real challenge would be to get it after it was placed inside the mirror. Controlling your thoughts with occlumency was definitely not the solution, since Voldemort was a master in it and would definitely have tried it. And Dumbledore would have made sure it didn't work. So besides magic training, Matthew experimented with different ways to fool enchantments and runes. After all, he didn't want to break the mirror. But gaining the Philosopher's Stone would allow him to open a gate to centuries of collected knowledge. He spent the rest of the year experimenting and training until the end of the year came closer. Once again he completed his exams as top of the year, with mostly outstandings and 2 exceeds expectations in astronomy and history of magic. Even with his restricted mind, he was able to perform above average, especially after he familiarized himself with the restrictions. According to Sarah's calculations, he would be able to apply the 2nd level of the spell before he left Hogwarts this year. Scene break. Sunday, the 16th of June, 1991. Today was the day of the Hogwarts end of the year feast. Tomorrow all of the Hogwarts students would travel from Hogsmeade with the Hogwarts Express in direction of London. Early in the morning Matthew entered the room of requirements for the last time this year. According to Sarah, his brain completely adjusted to the 1st level of the restriction spell. His thinking speed was a bit faster than before he applied the spell on himself. Once again he carved the runes for the spell formation into the ground and entered it. After sitting down he used his wand to cast the spell on himself. This time after a short stabbing pain, it quickly subsided. He didn't have a headache again. But his magic was again haywire and chaotic, and he once again had a hard time thinking. This time even his perception was affected. He had a hard time recognizing everything. It took him a while to see and recognize smaller details in his surroundings. It seems this level of the spell would affect the parts of his brain which were responsible for his perception. Which would be amazing after he mastered it. Would he be able to pull off a Sherlock Holmes where he even was able to perceive and analyze the smallest details? That would be amazing. Matthew spent the morning practicing to reach an acceptable level with his 5 senses since he didn't want to walk against people and things. He also practiced a bit of magic, but his senses were his main focus since he already removed the trace from his dragon heartstring wand. From now on he was able to practice magic at home. Well, as long he didn't go overboard, the Ministry would still be able to sense large-scale magic like wards or big spells, especially in a dense Muggle area like London, which they monitor closely. Since his trunk was always packed, since he carried it shrank on a necklace around his neck everywhere with him, he could spend most of the day in the room of requirements. Only in the afternoon shortly before the feast, he left the room to clean himself up in the Ravenclaw Tower, where he reunited with his friends in the common room. "Where were you the whole day, Matthew?" asked Roger as he spotted Matthew entering the common room from the dorms. "I used the day to practice as much magic as possible so I wouldn't get rusty over the holidays. After all, I am a Muggle-born and can't practice magic at home," replied Matthew with a half-lie. "Damn, you are hard-working. You should try having more fun, after all, we are only once young," stated Blake while staring at Matthew with an amazed expression on his face. "Because we are only once young, I want to use my life to its fullest, and learning magic is fun for me. You are a Muggle-born like me, Blake, but you already seem to have lost the amazement for magic after only 1 year here in Hogwarts. I want to explore all its possibilities," preached Matthew with glowing eyes. "Ha, well, that's a way to see it. Well, as long you don't overwork yourself, I am fine with it. We are friends after all," answered Blake with a thoughtful face. He has sunken into his thoughts. Scene break. The end of the year fest was the same as the last year. Slytherin won the House Cup once again, thanks to Professor Snape's preferential treatment. Their Quidditch team lost again to Gryffindor thanks to the amazing performance of their captain and seeker Charlie Weasley. But this was his last year in Hogwarts and he would leave for Romania soon to study dragons. Nymphadora Tonks would also graduate this year and enter a retraining under Mad-Eye Moody. Matthew totally forgot her since he hadn't much to do with Hufflepuffs. She was one of the more interesting characters in canon. If he could, he would prevent her death and befriend her in the future. As for their defense against the dark arts professor Claire Vermount, she left already 2 weeks ago. She got a new job assignment in Greece where they discovered some unexplored ancient ruins. Matthew would miss her since she was the last Dada professor who would actually teach them something before Remus Lupin and the fake Moody, Bartemius Crouch Jr. arrived in Hogwarts. After the feast, the students slept the last time inside their beds, before they would leave early in the morning for London with the Hogwarts Express. That's it guys, hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Make sure you comment below what kind of stories you want to see next and any recommendation you have.